This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
What is up, WSTers? Welcome to a Monday edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Andrew Hustler Paterson, Michael Remis with you. The vibes are much better today on Monday than they were heading into the weekend. Two massive wins by the Winnipeg Jets in Florida and Tampa over the weekend have, certainly stabilized the club and the fan base a little bit as the team gets ready to continue this juggernaut roadie tomorrow against the Carolina Hurricanes. But we went into the weekend saying just find a way to get a result, and they did it on back-to-back nights. Lots of different individuals contributing. We'll get to all of it and hear some of the audio from the Winnipeg Jets coming out of those big wins. Obviously, we'll spend quite a bit of time talking about the home team and the weekend they just had. Dave Poulin of TSN Hockey is going to join us a little bit later on. And we'll also have Jeff Hamilton on the program. We'll focus on the Jets. We'll also talk Bombers. Sounds like the official announcement of the 2025 Grey Cup coming to the Peg will be tomorrow, so we'll hit on that with Jeff as well. An incredible run for Matty Dunstone at the Brier. We'll touch on some big news in the National Football League, Canada, the World Baseball Classic, but we will certainly start in on the main course, and that is the Winnipeg Jets and a 4-point weekend for the club. After their season sort of looked like it was slipping away. Before we get Remo in here, welcome to everyone watching on YouTube. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that red subscribe button. And if you've only found us on YouTube, the audio podcast of Winnipeg Sports Talk is available each and every day, just in time for your drive home around 3:30 p.m. So make sure to search Winnipeg Sports Talk and subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And for you podcast listeners, great to have you all with us. Make sure to check out the Winnipeg Sports Talk YouTube page when you have a chance. Hit that red subscribe button. And when you're able to, join us live from 1 to 3 p.m. Central, or check the show with video afterwards at your convenience. Just before we get Remo in here, a huge thanks to the sponsors that make our show happen each and every day. Coolbet Canada, Princess Auto, Little Brown Jug, Culligan Water, Vita Health Fresh Market, Canadian Club, Wallace & Wallace, Consolidated Supply, F Apparel, Manitoba Battery, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Boston Pizza, Royal Sports, and of course the Why Not question of the day brought to you by our friends at Not Auto Corp at Waverly and McGillivray. Michael Remis, what a difference a couple days and a couple wins makes. How are you?
Yeah, this is completely different than all the emotions we felt on Friday after the loss to Minnesota. They were able to carry their strong play into the weekend. I think I joked with you, like the Jets, just when you think that they're, they might not be in a playoff spot by later in the week, they come out and, I don't want to say do the impossible, but I don't think not many people had them winning both games. And I thought they looked a lot better on Sunday against Tampa Bay than on Saturday. But I mean, they played well enough to win the two games last week against San Jose and Minnesota. They didn't win. And then on Sunday, they give up almost 50 shots and win in overtime against Florida. Hockey's a weird game, Huss, where you can do all the right things and you don't win, and then you can have an imperfect game and come with a win. But it was great to see them win, especially on Saturday. Mark Scheifele with the winner. The revenge narrative, I think wasn't sure if it was still there, but definitely applies versus Paul Maurice's Florida Panthers. And again, hanging on Sunday. And how about Connor Hellebuyck going back-to-back? Someone asked me before the weekend what I thought. I said, they'll go Hellebuyck in the first one. I wouldn't be shocked if he played both. And they needed the win, and they used him. And man, was he Was he good, Huss? Because we talked about that squeaker that he let in against Minnesota, and I mean, he was fantastic in both games.
Well, I mean, the one thing that, I mean, and again, this was, we were trying to spread some positive vibes on Thursday and Friday, as difficult as it was considering the predicament the team was in. But considering what happened with Hellebuyck on Wednesday night against the Minnesota Wild, the one thing I'm absolutely not surprised in the least is that he came out with a couple of his most important performances of the year. Yesterday, first star, 33 saves on 35 shots, including one that got past him in the first minute and a half of the game. It was, I mean, there's so much to get to from this. Just quickly back to the game on Saturday night against Florida. And we'll hear from Rick Bowness in a minute. Listen, I realize that we basically, discuss every aspect of these games and of the teams. And, sometimes a team will win and you'll be like, wow, they weren't really that good. They gave up too many shots. Honestly, like Bones said, however they found a way to do it, the first thing this team needed to do was get rewarded for something. And listen, that game was not a Picasso by any stretch of the imagination. And yes, the Florida Panthers had a ton of shots, which they've done and lost numerous times this year. It's probably an interesting story evaluating the Panthers as much as it was the Jets on that night. But there was a few things that happened that, were massive and things that we'd been talking about. The power play goes 2 for 3. Nikolai Ehlers scores a goal and was very, very impactful in a number of other aspects of the game, including generating scoring chances. And Vlad Nemetsnikov with the goals that he scored was huge. Nino Niederreiter keeps going. And Mark Scheifele got one early and got one in OT to win. And, all those things needed to happen for the Jets to grind out those 2 points. And you mentioned the overtime winner. The angle that Scheifele scored on was absolutely brilliant. But I do want to give credit to the Jets in OT, that in the last minute and a half or so, it was pretty clear that the Florida Panthers players that were on the ice had been on for a long time. And if you notice that Scheifele and Connor, and I can't remember who else was on with them, maybe Pionk at that time.
It was Pionk, and then he switched to Schmidt.
Okay, that's right. They had control in the zone and continued to skate around and just work those guys down and work the clock down, potentially to get it closer to a shootout. But I thought that the way that they handled the overtime and maintained puck possession and was able to, change those 2 players before Kyle Connor took it to the net and got it to the net where Mark Scheifele was for the rebound was a very, very excellent way to play. Because I think you knew if you got to overtime, you still felt good that you had a better chance of winning than losing with Connor Hellebuyck in the net. But they you know how you tenderize a piece of meat? They tenderized the guys that were on the ice there for Florida out there for so long before the puck went in the net. The bottom line is that was a win that in a lot of ways, this weekend overall, maybe it's overstating it to say save the season. But as we talk with Ken on, heading into the weekend, this in a lot of ways could be a season-defining road trip. And sure, over the past month plus, even more than that, the Jets had not been up to the level that they played earlier on. But with everything on the line right now and their playoff spot in jeopardy, they rose up. A number of guys did things that weren't happening before. It helped them win the game on Saturday. And I think the confidence from that win against the Panthers really helped them yesterday with one of their best road games they played in a long, long time, led, of course, by Connor Hellebuyck, who looked to be back to his Vezina level of play.
Yeah, it wasn't the prettiest, Hustler, but they were able to come out with 2 points on Saturday, and I agree with you. I loved the puck movement on that overtime goal, the shifting and all the passing. I think everyone touched the puck, and they were able to keep it in, and Connor found Scheifele. I mean, a lot to take away from the weekend. Connor Hellebuyck's play stands out, but I think the 2 guys making an impact every game have been Nemesnikov and Niederreiter. Niederreiter on a 6-game point streak. Nemesnikov, he didn't get on the score sheet yesterday, but he had 3 points on Saturday, 2 goals and an assist. these moves that Cheveldayoff made at the deadline, we got to praise him. Found the right guys who've been the right fit. Niederreiter providing exactly what they needed. Saw that goal on yesterday on the power play in front of the net where they needed help. Big body, he can shoot. And Nemestikov found some chemistry with Ehlers on Saturday. He's versatile, strong middle six forward. And maybe I was a bit underwhelmed. Not exactly a huge name, but he's definitely both of them huge impact. And also the team, the way they played without Josh Morrissey, who was hurt in Saturday, didn't play Sunday, and Adam Lowry hurt Saturday. They said he was going to be doubtful for Sunday and suited up.
Well,
I don't know. I guess the team, they don't need Josh Morrissey now, right, Huss?
Team plays better. Team plays better when the top defenseman's out. What does that say?
Well, what does it say?
Big blow to his Norris chances.
Yeah. So, incredible how everyone stepped up, and especially Dylan Samberg. And it amazes me how Dylan Samberg could go from third-pairing D to healthy scratch for Logan Stanley, and then Josh Morrissey's out and he slides into his spot and takes on his role. I would be shocked if he's a healthy scratch again this year, just the way that he was able to step up against a tough Tampa team. All around, there's so many things. One thing I do want to say in that Tampa, we're kind of flip-flopping here back and forth games, but on that Saturday game, credit to the refs for calling the Scheifele play the 5-minute major. And I think they do this. They call it a 5-minute major because they don't, they think it could be, but what if it isn't?
Absolutely.
And
they call it as a 5 and then review it.
And look, and if it was, they reviewed it, and I thought it was pretty obvious. Scheifele had position. Forsling tried to get around him. Wasn't able to. It's a pretty big play. It could have been a 5-minute major, but Scheifele stood his ground going into the corner, and I think it was just a tough play, two guys battling, and a very unfortunate result for Forsling, who did return, which shocked me because I thought that was going to be a very serious head injury. Just how he slammed into the boards there.
He just slammed in, but you know what? It reminded me, and this is a perfect segue because, of course, it is AEW week, and we'll probably talk a little more wrestling. Yes. The way that he took that hit was sort of like the way the wrestlers hit the mat, where it sort of distributes it over your entire body. Like it was a solid, flat shot to the boards. It wasn't like, go one and hit the head. Anyways, it was good that he wasn't hurt. And that, of course, was the second major penalty that had been called and overturned on replay. Is Kyle Connor a goon? Is he trying to make sure that he never even is mentioned in the Lady Byng Trophy conversation again? He had as many penalty minutes on the weekend than he did all of last season. And yes, was called for a major. That was bizarre. Ekblad looked like he had been shot. And then you went back and looked at listen, there was a slash and he did get 2 minutes for it. But I really think that just with the reaction of a veteran player like that, was that way worse than we thought? Let's call the major and go back. The bottom line is I don't have issues with the refs doing that. I think that when you're doing something as impactful as calling a major penalty, you would like to have the benefit of video review, or from a defensive standpoint, like from the Jet standpoint, you want to make sure that they're getting the right call. So if they're going to do that but still review them, I think most coaches are fine with that. And the bottom line was they got it right on both, one being a 2-minute penalty and one, Mark Scheifele given the I told you so and going from the penalty box right back to the Jets bench with no penalty whatsoever.
It's kind of funny. I was thinking about it. The Jets on the weekend went 3-0 on video reviews. The other one coming Saturday, where Brendan Dillon goes what he called his office in front of the net.
Line by Dillon.
Which was a pretty solid line. And Morgan Barron puts in the game-winning goal. I thought that was a play. Dillon went hard to the net. He didn't crash into Vasilevsky, really. He was kind of right in his face. And I didn't really think I wasn't, you don't know what they're going to do on those. I know Kevin Sawyer, he's broadcasting Jets games. He was like 100%, this is not. And he was right. I don't know if I would have been that confident that he was. And he kind of joked to the end that he's not going to have to eat, his hat or whatever he said he was going to eat. If
believe me, he doesn't have a hat, and he wasn't wearing a hat on the weekend at all. And that was quite obvious. Nice little tinge. He had the pink in the tie to go with his face. Nothing better than the little bit of off time for the broadcasters when you're down in between Florida. I think he spent some quality time at the pool before the game on Sunday.
Hey, it's cold here, us in Winnipeg. I don't blame
I was
the Jets
jealous.
going to Florida. Sorry, Jets going to Florida, getting a couple wins, and the broad, soaking in the sun. I think you need that. Gives you energy, and they definitely had energy this weekend. And we joked, was it last weekend or 2 weekends ago, against the Islanders on Sunday, where we said, "Oh yeah, this game tests your character, and we're gonna see what you're made of." And they go out against the Islanders and have one shot in the first period, and against them, I think this is more urgent adversity with a couple teams breathing down your neck in Nashville and Calgary in the playoffs, and the Jets have two very tough opponents, and we're able to come out with 4 points on the road. Sorry if I interrupted you there.
Oh,
my
no.
headphones came
I mean,
unplugged.
you're exactly right, though. I mean, and getting back to the desperation and urgency, I mean, I think we saw that at a lot of times. Now, listen, there were still some mishaps. There were a couple goals you would like to see not go in. I mean, they just welcomed the Lightning back into the game last night with a mishap on the power play of all things, after being up 3-1 and getting a power play on that the goal that Brendan Dillon started and Morgan Barron slammed in. And by the way, great to see Morgan Barron get one. I thought he and Mason Appleton were monsters yesterday, and obviously there's a huge worry about Adam Lowry. He played last night and had a very, very impactful game. But I mean, the back and forth between Pionk and Wheeler on that power play will be discussed. You can hang it on either of those guys. Bottom line is that was self-inflicted, as some of the issues the Jets have had more often than not have been. But the way they, led by Connor Hellebuck, I think really steeled themselves afterwards. And maybe the biggest play in the entire game, Remo, we've talked a lot about the PK, which got worked pretty hard on Saturday night by the Panthers. Stepped up after Kevin Stenlund took that stick penalty while killing a penalty and a 5-on-3 against Tampa Bay. Hellebuck was perfect during that period of time. They had the tight triangle. I thought the guys did a good job of letting the goaltender see the puck and clearing rebounds. And that penalty kill, bouncing back from a tough night for the PK the night before, I thought really allowed them to survive that period where the Lightning were really pushing. And I'll tell you what, that third period for the Winnipeg Jets, I mean, you knew Tampa was going to create they're one of the best teams in the league. I mean, they weren't just going to quit and leave. But the Jets were able to transition quickly and create some great chances of their own. And I mean, Kyle Connor, Mason Appleton were in all alone at times. Could have easily scored, but there was a hell of a goaltender on the other side of things in Andrei Vasilevsky. So building off that win on Saturday, which they so desperately needed, with an even better performance, doing it without Josh Morrissey, man, I'm not sure that this weekend, certainly results-wise, could have gone any better for the Jets. And combine it with Calgary dropping a game to the Ducks on home ice on Friday. That fire alarm that was happening when it came to the Jets playoff spot. We brought the hose out a little bit on it. They're certainly in a much better situation right now. 6 points up. And I had said to you going into the Minnesota game, you've got Minnesota, Florida, Tampa, Carolina, Boston. If you could get 5 out of 10 points, I think you survive that. Well, the Jets have 5 already. Obviously, very difficult matchups. I mean, no guarantees on any sort of result against Carolina or Boston. But they've given themselves the opportunity to do exactly that, to exceed, I think, anyone's expectations. And the bottom line is, I think they've calmed the nerves of themselves and the fan base with those massive 4 points over the last couple nights.
Yeah, just going over the special teams yesterday. Lightning 0 for 3 on the power play, including that key 5-on-3. Jets 1 for 2. It was the Niederreiter goal. And I'm looking at time on ice, and the guy with the lowest ice time, David Gustafsson, 8:29, just showed you how all 4 lines were going. And it makes you wonder what's going to happen when Pierre-Luc Dubois comes back. He's not going to be playing tomorrow. He was skating at the Hockey for All Center yesterday morning, and they decided he's not going to travel. You hope he's back Thursday. The Jets don't have any media today, travel day for them, and we'll wait and hear. We'll wait for tomorrow to see about what happens with Josh Morrissey and anything else that may have popped up here. But I think the line's looking great. And funny, last week we were so down Thursday, Friday on this team. The playoff chances had dipped below 80% on money puck after being like in the 90s all season. They've gone up here to 85, and you look at Nashville, 14.1%. They had a nice overtime win yesterday after almost blowing it to Anaheim. Calgary had a nice win. But the Jets are basically, going against these two teams, and it's so funny. Last week, again, we were so down. And now I'm like, hey, if the Jets get in the playoffs, and then what? They get the 2 or the 3 in the Central, where they are now and not a wild card, and you don't play Colorado, they could beat I think they could beat. Like, does any other team really in the West make you that nervous except for Colorado? Maybe Edmonton, because they have McDavid and Draisaitl.
The Jets play Edmonton well.
Yeah, they play exactly. They play Edmonton well.
I mean, they swept them a couple of years ago. I mean, I guess the teams are different now, and I think Edmonton, with the addition of Ekholm, although I still have major questions about their goaltending, and I don't have that about the Winnipeg Jets. I mean, listen, if the Jets are in the playoffs and you have the Connor Hellebuck that we saw last night, not necessarily the one from earlier this week, the Jets are going to be a very, very tough out. And even if things ended right now, I was just looking at the projections from Micah Blake McCurdy, and let's say the Jets make the playoffs but finish in that second wild card. Vegas right now is projecting to be the number 1 team. A first-round Jets Knights, that would be pretty juicy. And I know Jonathan Quick has been awesome. He shut out Carolina on the weekend, and he's actually looking more like the old Jonathan Quick early on in his time with the Vegas Golden Knights. But, I mean, especially with the potentially no Mark Stone, we'll see what happens with him, whether he's going to be coming back. Colorado's the team that, when fully healthy, scared me the most. I think Edmonton would be right up there, but again, it's all about getting in right now. And I'm not willing to say that, hey, 2 wins, everything's fine. The last 2 months is completely in the rearview mirror. But at the same point, like I said, find a way, figure it out, get a result, just get a win this weekend. They ended up getting 2. Calgary lost a game they had to have against the Ducks. So the Jets certainly are in a much, much better position. And I mean, I'm not even sure there's a massive benefit to being 3rd or 2nd or 4th. It's about getting in, seeing where the chips land and who you got in the first round, and playing your best hockey. And certainly we saw much more of that on the weekend, especially in Sunday's game, than we had as of late. As good as they played, frankly, against San Jose and Minnesota. What was so impressive, though, about this, we knew Minnesota just played the night before, a 65-minute game against Calgary going into Wednesday night's game. And yeah, the Blackhawks were playing both of those teams the nights before, but Florida needed that. They are playing playoff games right now, and the Tampa Bay Lightning, nothing's easy against a team like that. So there is a lot to like about the weekend for the Winnipeg Jets. And as I say, considering what the situation was with the Jets' playoff spot and how precarious it looked going into the weekend, very different story today, and we are all here for it. Let's go to Saturday, because Remo, I want to get to that clip from Bones afterwards, who I think said the obvious. I mean, you can pick apart parts of the game, but the bottom line was they needed to find a way to win. They did it, and Bones said, "We will take a win any way we can get it."
We'll take a win any way of time we can get it, any way we can get it. I think a lot of our problems tonight were self-inflicted with poor puck management. That really hurt us. We spent some unnecessary time in our zone. The good news is we scored the 5 goals, which was huge. The power play looked good. And so the puck went in the net for us. And really, yeah, we probably played a lot better the last 2 games and lost. So we'll take any win we can get it, any way we can get it. It was scrambling out there for both teams. It was.
All right, man, you could just almost feel the relief in Bones' voice talking about the win. And there's no apologizing for a win like that, especially when you need it as badly as the Winnipeg Jets did. Another guy that really stepped up on the weekend, and the Jets have needed it, is Mark Scheifele. I thought Scheifele was dangerous in both of the games, but particularly that Florida game. And man, he looked engaged too. I mean, at times over the course of the season, the last couple months, there's been some times where Scheifele's play and engagement, I think, has left some people wanting more. That certainly was not the case right now, and that is a great sign for the Winnipeg Jets. Bones talked about his number 1 center and Scheifele's performance after the win against the Panthers.
We were just talking about him, the defensive play at the end of the game, behind the net, battling as hard as he did. So he had an outstanding game, both sides of the puck. So happy to see the goals go in. But it was just as important as what he did at the end of the game, defensively in our zone, battling behind the net and winning that battle and getting it out. So solid game from him.
All right, so there's Bones on Scheifele. Now, coming out of that game, Remo, as you mentioned, there were questions. And to quote Rick Bowness, he said both Josh Morrissey and Adam Lowry were very, very doubtful for the game on Sunday, and we'd have more this week. That was ominous. I mean, the thought of rolling, especially without Josh Morrissey for an extended period of time, I think scared the bejesus out of most people involved with the Winnipeg Jets. That being said, Dylan Samberg came in, didn't miss a beat, played a very strong game, and everybody stepped up. Neil Pionk pushed almost 24 minutes last night in the game against the Lightning. But Adam Lowry was out there for the game against Tampa, which was a nice surprise. And I got to tell you, Remo, that Barron, Appleton, Lowry line had one of their best games of the year. We mentioned Morgan Barron's goal and how important that was for him after being a little snake bit lately. And Mason Appleton, I think, will still feel pretty snake bit after the chances that he had. But they weren't just doing a good job shutting down the opposition. They played a lot of time in the other team's end. And I thought the way that they skated and broke the puck out was considerably better than we'd seen for a while.
Yeah, Morgan Barron's really had a lot of chances. Going back to the Edmonton game, we know that he has the best speed on the team as far as the fastest skater competition at the skills. But I think you're seeing that he's creating chances, going to the net, shorthanded for sure. And you did see him, put it in the rebound for the game winner. So I like the way Morgan Barron looks. Nathan Appleton had that chance on the breakaway. Kyle Connor went for the deke on his breakaway, and Vasilevsky stopped it, but Appleton goes in with the shot. And we've talked with Jeff about them, wanting to have this third line shutdown style like they had with Lowry, Kopp, and Tanev. Maybe this is the early beginning of bringing this line, and they're going to have some tough tests coming up against Carolina, although Carolina hasn't scored a lot the last couple of games. But Boston is probably going to be a very tough test on Thursday. So, we'll monitor Adam Lowry's health. Going from very doubtful to
looked pretty good last night.
Going from very doubtful to playing against one of the top lines in the NHL. So I think you got to be positive. And we've talked about the bottom six needing to chip in, and there they were yesterday with a big goal. So when they score three, get goals from all the lines, it's a nice recipe for success, which they had yesterday, even without their best D and Josh Morrissey. Incredible.
Well, and I mean, you gave Chevy some credit for those two trades, and I mean the contributions of both Nino Niederreiter and Vlad Nemetsnikov, which we'll talk a little bit more with Hammer a little bit later on. I do wonder, if Pierre-Luc Dubois is back, presumably in his spot, centering that second line, does Nemetsnikov move back to playing with Barron and Lowry where he was to start off? Or with the way Mason Appleton played yesterday and the way that line was looking, is Nemetsnikov now actually on potentially the fourth line, centering it? I think it gives them some options, but both of those players have been absolutely huge over the course of even the way the team was playing, not getting the results earlier this week. Nemetsnikov was impactful in the game they won in his debut against the Edmonton Oilers last week, right after the deadline. And I think both will be, whether Nemetsnikov is on the right side of that third line or elsewhere in the lineup, I think they're going to find spots to play him right now because, certainly he's been a real breath of fresh air, and man, they needed it. Along with Niederreiter, who I don't think could have imagined him doing much better. Let's get to Sunday though, and it wasn't. Much like, hey, back-to-back, even the coaches need a little bit of load management. Yeah. So it was Scott Arniel that did the post-game media avail. And Arnie talked about just how big it was to get 2 points on the board back-to-back nights against two real good teams.
Yeah, it's huge. Two tough burns, especially now, the last couple of years, how good Florida is. And, it's a real desperate time for us for points, and we have to keep pace with everybody in our division and our conference. So we knew it was going to be a tough trip, and so far I've been off to a great start.
All right, so Scott Arniel putting out the great start and just how desperate they were, and obviously got what they needed, and those were a couple big wins. I was just mentioning how good that Lowry, Appleton, Barron line was. They certainly impressed Scott Arniel last night. Here's what the coach had to say about his third line's performance against Tampa.
Yeah, they've obviously with Apple's injuries, but them getting back and kind of being that shutdown line. They had a tough assignment last night with the Barkov, and then again tonight they had to put a lot of miles on it, and they did a fantastic job. There's an awful lot of good skill on that other team in Tampa, as we know, and they did what they needed to do, and that was to be at their best, and they got a lot of opportunities off it as well by playing well without the puck.
All right, Scott Arniel on the Barron, Appleton, Lowry last night. As we mentioned, maybe the most crucial point in the entire game. After giving up that shorthanded goal, the Jets went down a man, and then Kevin Stenlund took a tripping penalty for an extended 5-on-3 kill. The Jets stepped up, led by Connor Hellebuck, got that kill, and Scott Arniel talked about killing that 5-on-3 situation and what that did for his team.
Yeah, well, I saw a goaltender make a couple of big ones, but at the end of the day, we knew that they were, they're shooters, and they've got a lot of different weapons. Everybody's dangerous. It's not like you can take one guy away or two guys away. Everybody was a part of that. And you know what? We tried not to get too far away from Helly and try to get in and help on those rebounds last night. A couple of those were sort of battles right on top of Helly. I thought tonight we did a better job, not only on the 5-on-3, but the 5-on-4s of coming back and finding those loose pucks and getting them out of there.
All right, so Scott Arniel, more from last night's game. And I'll say this, Remo, I don't know about you, but Hellebuck looked so good on that 5-on-3. And I know a couple pucks had already gotten by him. He probably wouldn't have loved the first one early on in the game. But watching the way he played on that 5-on-3, how structured he looked, how confident, how big he looked, I don't know about you, but I had a real level of confidence that was completely back, that Connor Hellebuck was on top of his game, and that proved correct because the Lightning were not able to beat him again, and obviously lost the game.
Yeah, I don't know the last time a goalie started back-to-back games on Saturday and Sunday and faced the volume of shots that he did. 33 of 35 yesterday. He made 44 saves in the win on Saturday on 48 shots, and I had thought maybe that they would go with him. I was like, he faced 48 shots on Saturday. He's not playing Sunday, but he is their guy.
How could they not?
He wanted the ball.
That's my question.
What do you
How
make
do you not play him?
What do you make of the decision to start him? I mean, obviously it's the right one because it worked, but long term, do you think we could see a worn down Hellebuck here in the playoffs? Is concerns for you, Hustler?
No,
people in
none
our
at all.
comments concerned.
I have no concerns, and I said it as much on Friday that I'd be shocked if he didn't play back-to-back as long as he, had a good game against the Panthers. Listen, Hellebuck's done this 3 times this year, and I think he's 3-0. He can play a lot, and, there will be opportunities to get Big Save Dave in at some point. It might be tomorrow, to be honest. I mean, I could see him potentially playing tomorrow. But I'll be honest, if it's me, I think I might play him the next couple of games and then give David Riddick either Nashville or St. Louis next week. Because as I said, Connor Hellebuck, I think, wanted to get in as much as anyone considering the way things went earlier this week, and he didn't play on the Monday. He can handle it right now. I mean, you start him 82 games, no, but hey, they're getting ready for the playoffs, and you know what happens at the playoffs. You ride one goalie night in and night out, and considering the Jets situation, until they officially clinch a playoff spot, I think we're going to see Connor Hellebuck playing most of the games. When do you think we'll see Dave next? Does he go tomorrow, or do we wait till the weekend?
I think he goes tomorrow. That's my pick, and I'm enjoying some of the comments here. BA Split makes a great point. He's like, goalies don't get tired. Players are playing every freaking game, and goalies. We don't talk about resting Mark Scheifele because he's tired from playing in back-to-back, huh? So why are we talking about goalies like this? But yeah, I think Rittich will go tomorrow and Hellebuck Thursday. And, Rittich, they usually play Hellebuck the first game of the back-to-back and then give the backup the second game. So nice, the schedule.
Hey, just on BA Split's point, I'm going to agree with BA on that, and I will take it one step further. a lot of people in the media and sometimes even coaches and whatnot, they're talking about, well, we're going to make a decision based on the workload. I mean, like if a guy sees 8 more official shots on goal in a game, does that make him less available to play the next day? I mean, to me, you're playing, you're locked in for the entire game. I mean, I guess if you're sitting there with no action whatsoever, maybe it's a lighter night. But I mean, you either play or you don't play. And the next day, are you able to go? Are you able to go? So I was glad that they went with Hellebuyck. I thought he was going to be the best version of himself on the weekend. The team needed him to be that way. And I think he, on a personal level, knows that he needed to kind of make up for a disappointing night on Wednesday and did that in spades. One of the other things, back to Arneal, that was really impressive, especially last night, was the traffic that the Winnipeg Jets were getting in front of the net. During the time when they were quite cold and the offense wasn't happening, a lot of it was coming from around the perimeter. That wasn't the case last night. They were paying the price to get into the net, and Scott Arneal talked about the net front's presence on a couple of the Winnipeg Jets goals last night.
A goaltender like Vasilevsky, you have to have traffic. You have to have bodies around the net front. You have to make it difficult on him. If anything he sees, he's gonna stop. So part of the game plan was to get to him, get down in there, put pucks into his feet, and kind of hope that sort of the chaos happens from there.
All right, Scott Arneal. We got one more on our Arnie, who mentioned the Winnipeg Jet defense corps stepping up big time. Everyone needing to play up with Josh Morrissey's absence for the first time this season. And here was Arneal's comments on the defense core and the way they hung in there without 44 on the blue line.
Yeah, it was by committee. I thought that, we had to use everybody back-to-back games, where Josh can log some big minutes. Everybody had to be a part of it, and real proud of the guys. Did a real good job of clearing the front of the net. And I know there was a lot of sort of crazy situations that were going on at times, and they kept their head. I like the way we moved the puck up. We were quick. We didn't allow extended times in our end of the rink. We played fast, and that helped a lot for us to get on and get in Tampa's end.
All right, so a little bit more from Scott Arneal, who, as I said, we gave Bones some load management on those back-to-backs. He didn't talk after the game last night, but Scott Arneal did. Brenden Dillon, Arnie just mentioned him, 800th game in the National Hockey League, and a very, very impactful player in both of those games. But Dillon talked about hanging on for a win after giving up that shorthanded goal in such a crucial situation last night.
We like to keep things interesting. I never want to get too high or too low. I think it's a credit to our group. We've got a bunch of key important guys out back to back in a tough building with a hungry team there, and we're able to manage it. We showed a lot of character with that. We had guys blocking shots. Penalty kill came up huge. We just overall played a great road game. We really wanted to work on our road game in general coming into this trip, and to get a big back-to-back couple wins in some tough buildings against some tough teams is huge for our group.
Yeah, of course, Brenden Dillon on the snow goal as well, kind of giving Andre Vasilevsky a little bit of extra company in the crease, and then Morgan Barron batting in that rebound for a much-needed goal for him personally and for the Winnipeg Jets. One other thing about Dylan Ream, and I can't say I'm surprised at all, he was the guy that got the A on his jersey with Josh Morrissey out, and man, did he step up, playing a second most ice time on the blue line of all defenders, just behind Neil Pionk, 21-23, including 2.5 minutes shorthanded, and as well a big part of that 5-on-3 kill.
Yeah, had a big assist too, and Dillon, gives a great answer there. He goes to the net on the game winner. He's a physical guy. I joke he's one of the few quote unquote fat guys, use an ice hockey term. No offense, Brenden Dillon, but he's a big guy. He can push people around. They needed a guy like him on the team, and is really fitting in pretty nicely here down the stretch. And I was listening to Kenny and Rennie, and they said, Kenny was like, yeah, Dillon, he's kind of like the Brian Little who gives, the realistic answers, or the Paul Stastny role. When you need, hear it straight how the team is going, you hear it from him. And I guess not much of a surprise that they slapped the A on him with Josh Morrissey out.
Yeah, definitely deserve it. We got one more from Dylan. This is a really good clip. It was well documented here and elsewhere as to how critical this road trip was for the Winnipeg Jets and the gauntlet that they were going to be playing. Brendan Dillon just expanded a little bit on getting 2 wins in the first 2 games of a tough road trip so far.
Yeah, we wanted to come into this one hoping for 6 points. So the fact that we've got the first 4, we're confident in our group. We know we've gone through a tough spell here the last 10, 15 games, but we're the ones that are going to have to get out of it. We're going to have to find ways to win. Injuries, we can't use any excuses for us. And tonight, everybody stepped up. Our checkers checked, our offensive guys produced, and everyone just contributed whatever way they needed to.
Yeah, and just last one for me, but you guys have that template from earlier in the year, and they get 7 guys out at one point, and maybe some of your best hockey of the year, right? So obviously it's not a good thing to have anyone out, but you know how to play when you're shorthanded.
Yeah, and that's what we got to be confident in. Whoever's in the lineup, I think we had about 25 guys out there for warm-ups just in case, seeing who could go, who couldn't go. There was only so many pucks to go around, but we're just finding ways to make it work, and good teams find ways to win.
All right, there's Brendan Dillon. What a weekend he had, as did his Winnipeg Jets. Jeff Hamilton coming up a little later on. We're going to talk about the Jets and the rest of the NHL right now with TSN's Dave Poulin, one of our favorites. Before we do that, folks, don't forget, whether you're working, need a battery for your car, your truck, or that summer toy you're working on, Manitoba Battery, our great sponsors over at 1026 Logan Avenue, is the place to get the best price on batteries. Shop local with the convenience of having it delivered to you. That's right. You can give them a call at lunchtime or even early on in Winnipeg Sports Talk and have that battery you need delivered and on your doorstep in 2 to 4 hours anywhere in the city of Winnipeg at a lower price that you'll pay at one of the big box stores. Don't waste your time finding a parking spot at Costco or waiting in line at Canadian Tire or giving your money to the big box stores. Shop local, save time and gas, and let Manitoba Battery deliver it to you. Give them a phone call, 783-8787, or order online at manitobabattery.com. It's that simple. Big thanks to Manitoba Battery for their great support of WST. All right, speaking of great support of Winnipeg Sports Talk, special thanks to our friends at Consolidated Supply. Didn't get too much snow this weekend, which is great. We're that much closer to spring. And the gang Consolidated Supply are already working on the upcoming season. Certainly when it comes to golf courses, they're the leader when it comes to golf cars, but also irrigation and artificial turf projects. And you don't just need to be a golf course to use Consolidated Supply. If you're working on a landscaping project for your property, talk to them about irrigation solutions. And hey, if you're thinking about any area that could use artificial turf, they've got you hooked up as well. And hey, it's not just what's going to be on the ground. What about a spa or a hot tub? How about a beautiful outdoor kitchen? Got amazing options like that, as well as small engine parts and repairs. They're the leader for that as too. Consolidated Supply. Pop down and see them for all your needs. 1395 Niagara Road East. Or check out everything they can do for you at cte.ca. We are welcoming in our nominations for the Unsung Hero for another month, along with our great friends at Wallace & Wallace. All you need to do, folks, is send us an email to unsunghero@winnipegsportstalk.com. Might be a great time to nominate someone that's been incredibly active in helping minor hockey or minor sports programs throughout the year. Whether you're volunteering with charities, with programs like that, or just being that go-to person on the block or in the community helping others, let us know about that person. The Unsung Hero for the month will get an autographed jersey from Jets All-Star defenseman Josh Morrissey. Wallace & Wallace will make a $500 donation to the Dream Factory in the name of the Winnipeg Sports Talk listener that nominated the Unsung Hero, and Josh and Margot Morrissey will match that as well. So send us your nominations for the Unsung Hero for March, unsunghero@winnipegsportstalk.com. And hey, just before we get to Dave Poulin, if you're looking for great prices on natural and organic supplements, beauty products, and groceries, and Winnipeg's largest assortment of local products too, Vita Health Fresh Market is the place. St. Patrick's Day is coming up on Friday. They've got great non-alcoholic craft beer and mocktails, amazing snacks as well. And guys, with spring just around the corner, allegedly, get ready for it with Ultimate Male Energy. Formulated specifically for men over 35, Ultimate Male Energy is designed to help improve testosterone production, reduce excess body fat, build muscle tissue, maintain prostate health, and more. And it's on sale today at Vita Health. Vita Health Fresh Market, empowering people to lead healthy lives. Family owned for 85 years in Winnipeg, 7 Winnipeg locations, including the newest store in Linden Ridge, and online at myvita.ca. All right, the hammer's still to come. Right now, let's welcome in TSN's Dave Poulin. Poulin, what's up? Hope you had a great weekend. We certainly did here in Winnipeg. Amazing what a couple wins can do for a team and a fan base.
It really is amazing, and that's the ebbs and flows of what we're going through right now. Those last 20 games. Actually, the article I wrote in the Star on Sunday was about, wait a second, we still have 20 games left? Like, you think the trade deadline's done and here we go, we're going to work and we don't have to worry about anything else. But no, there's a lot of hockey left to be played. And I think that it's already playoffs, Andrew, and in the way you handle the time between games is so critical right now. And I'm speaking to the fans as well, as well as the players and the broadcasters as well as the players, because in a 7-game series, you win the first game, well, you're on cloud 9. But you can't be, because you have to play game 2. And likewise, if you lose the first game, you haven't lost the series. And yet that's the way wins and losses are going right now. Everybody's looking, but they're computing points, and they're computing other teams' schedules, and they're computing all these different factors that go into play. And you have to worry about your own games and play your own games. And I think Winnipeg did an excellent job of doing that. And maybe the weather had a little bit to do with it. Maybe it was like, you know what, we're in sunny Florida, we're allowed to smile and we're allowed to be good, and they were.
Well, the funny thing is, in years past, sometimes that Florida break has not necessarily been a positive for the performance of the Jets or other teams. But, I mean, to be frank, Dave, it really did seem like the Jets were in a real crisis situation. I mean, they had been dropping. They had probably the worst record in the league over the last dozen games. All the hard work that they built that lead up earlier in the year had evaporated. And you come off 2 really good games played at home with only 1 point to show for it, and then go out on maybe the most daunting road trip and schedule of the season. How important can one win for a team that's struggling, for a team that hasn't had things go well for them? That was not a blueprint game on Saturday night against the Panthers, but they got a win. How much can just one result do for a team that desperately needs it?
It's one result with tangible points attached to it. And the games you talk about, my experience has always been that when you're going through a real struggle, you play well before you win. And just like when you're on a long winning streak, you play a couple games and like, yeah, we weren't great, but we won. And going in and out of those types of streaks, you're going to have these times at some points during the year. You're just flat out going to. Everybody does. I mean, even Boston's in a massive 2-game losing streak over the last 2 weeks, aren't they?
Yeah, so, for their standard.
Yeah, but everybody's going to have them. So when would you rather have them? Well, for me, I'd rather have them with 20 games left in the season, when you can address them and adjust and not have this be, you have a terrible 2-week period in the first round of the playoffs, you're done. So you'd hope that it's out of the way, you've addressed some things that you have to address. And it's so hard to address them when you're winning, Andrew. As much as you would say, I've been on both sides of it. I've stood and spoken in a locker room, I've stood or sat and listened in a locker room. When you're winning and the coach comes in and says, we have to do this, this, and this, your tendency is to look at the guy next to you and go, what's he so upset about? We're winning. We'll fix it. And that's not, Rick Bowness knew what he was talking about when they were still winning. And then they got, into a situation where they couldn't get a win. So those last 2 games where you come out with only 1 point in those last couple games, he was stressing that we're playing better. They have to understand we're playing better. We have to keep doing the things we're doing and we'll be rewarded. And I thought in Florida, in both games are rewarded. And, you lose a player of the stature of Josh Morrissey that you lose, and yet you find a way to get it done. Dylan Sandberg, I thought, did a nice job last night coming in. But you found a way to get it done against 2 teams that are desperate in their own right. I mean, Florida is just trying to be there. And Tampa Bay's gone through arguably their toughest stretch in the last 3 years. So I think they're better wins than they even look right now in terms of getting the job done. And he had some huge contributions as well. I think, Niederreiter's starting to fit in and starting to contribute. And, across the board, everybody's got to contribute to be in a good place at this point of the year.
The irony about Niederreiter is, I think last week when there'd been a real power outage of some of the top players, the power play, and he's been the one guy that's been consistently scoring. I mean, what an addition he's been. And Nemetsnikov's been very, very much a factor as well. But Dave, I want to go back to Saturday for a minute because, as I mentioned, I mean, the shots in the game were just about 2-1 for Florida. Connor Hellebuck had a rough couple of games coming in. The power play hadn't been scoring. There was a number of things that happened in that game that you probably didn't like. Obviously, them coming back, but yet you got to win and hit on a number of things that were missing in a game. Special teams, certainly. I mean, the penalty kill's been elite for the Winnipeg Jets pretty much all season long, despite getting victimized on the weekend in that game. But tell us about a power play and how you can go through a period of time where things just don't seem in sync, and what a little bit of success can do for a unit like we saw this weekend for the Jets.
The power play is arguably the most scouted thing in the game. And when a power play is good, it's scouted that much more. When it has the components that Winnipeg has. And so what are you focused on in the power play? The driver on the backside was Josh Morrissey, yes. I think the key person up front is Kyle Connor because of where he shoots, how he shoots. So when you're scouting through the course of a year, you watch another team's success against. So let's look at Florida. Florida's saying, okay, who's been good against Winnipeg's power play recently? And just pick 3 teams. Say these 3 teams, Minnesota shut them down. What did they do? And then it gets really specific. Well, they took away the pass to Connor. So we're going to take away the pass to Connor. So you have something tangible to teach your guys. And that's why, Andrew, quite frankly, the power play is very often less of a factor in the playoffs. There's less penalties called. And the scouting is so sophisticated and so ingrained in guys' minds. And I was a penalty killer. And you knew that the more I saw you do something, if you keep repeating it because it's successful, eventually I'm going to shut it down. And so you have to change it up. You have to be willing to alter it. And ultimately, what it has to start with, for me, if my power play is struggling, is a shot on net and a puck retrieval. So now I'm asking my power play guys to do the hardest job, that's get the puck back. But they have to be willing to do that. They can't go to their favorite spots, lock in, and think it's going to work. And every team goes through it, so you've got to be willing to adjust. And that's why I don't mind the tinkering of a guy here or there either, in a different spot, just to change things up. So the other team is saying, okay, well, we haven't seen them do that. Let's adjust to that. And so I think it's inevitable. It's why even the truly elite power plays, as you witness right now in Edmonton, goes through times when we're just going to sit on Leon Draisaitl over here. We're not letting them touch the puck. And, and Connor's going to have to beat us and things like that, that inevitably you go through.
One of the topics that we had hit on the program was sort of wondering at one point the personnel was going to be shaken up a little bit, and specifically with Nikolai Ehlers. I mean, at the start of the year, he was penciled in as a number 1 power play guy, missed all that time, has not really spent much time at all on that top unit, and it hadn't been working. They stayed with it, especially with the arrival of Niederreiter, and got some success this week. But at the same time, Nikolai Ehlers, and I think this goes back to the San Jose and especially the Minnesota game, looked a little bit more dangerous, looked like he was getting back into his groove. But he scored, and you could see him on the television on Saturday night. I believe the words was, "It's about bleeping time," to get that goal and to get back on. We've talked about Nick beforehand, but he's missed a lot of time, maybe took a little bit of time to get back to his top level, but had struggled lighting the lamp. What have you seen of his play over the last week? And for a player like that to actually get some results, much like the team overall, what can that do individually for going forward for a guy that, honestly, this team needs so much from?
He's an enormous boost to the squad. There's no question. And when you think about Nikolai, if you said to me, where is his exact spot on the team? That's not an easy answer. It's just not. And it's been a changing spot, even if you go back a couple of years, like, because, you know, at one point you'd say, well, the first line is clearly at one point Scheifele, Wheeler, and Connor. And you say, okay, well, where does that put Nikolai? Well, who's the second line center that day and who's he playing with? And it's been somebody different. And now you introduce Pierre-Luc, and are you worried about, he's a versatile guy. He can play either side. And because of his speed and because he can play the individual game, he's not a guy that you worry about when you're listing. It's almost like he's the last option of the six. Okay, we'll just put Nikolai there. And it's not fair, but it comes with his versatility, and it comes with the fact that he can be a solo artist as well. And sometimes that's, I mean, as good a player as he is, because he doesn't have to rely on two other guys, you don't worry about placing him as much. It's a weird concept, actually. You're almost cursed by your own skill set. And I think that's sometimes what it is. But when he first came back, like the first game or two, he was flying. And when he's using his speed, to me, the most dangerous Nikolai Ehlers is when he's coming from behind. He's coming back deep in the zone. You can see him building up the speed. He's coming full tank at you. And that's when he causes major, major issues. And then, you know, who's playing off him. So once, you know, Dubois gets back in the lineup and is healthy and we get that measure done, as that happens now, how does Nino Niederreiter fit in? What's the makeup going to be? But these are good problems to have as everybody gets healthy.
Well, I mean, it is just funny. I mean, we think back to training camp, the things that were different about this club. And one of the things that Rick Bowness said right off the bat was Nikolai Ehlers was going to be on the top line, was going to be on the top power play. He plays 2 games, misses half the season. Mm-hmm. And now it seems the landscape of the team is very much different. Bottom line is they need both of those lines to be going. And
no question,
Ehlers is a big part of it. But this does go back to injuries, Dave. And one of the familiar refrains I heard from friends over the course of the weekend was, why does it take this team to lose a bunch of their top players to raise that level? And one could argue, I mean, the best stretch this team had all year was when they were missing Ehlers and Wheeler and Nate Schmidt and Mason Appleton. And the lull has sort of happened over the past month since this team's been as healthy as it's been all year. And then guys go down this weekend, important players, Adam Lowry and then Josh Morrissey on the back end yesterday. And it seems that the team steps up in a way that they haven't in the past. Is there any rhyme or reason to this?
No, there's not. There really isn't. I think it's always been the case. Maybe there's a slight bit more desperation in each individual's game because they realize they have a little bit more to give. But ideally, when that happens and the player comes back in the lineup, everybody takes what they've done to elevate, continues, and you're adding a Josh Morrissey back in or a Lowry back in or a Dubois back in or whomever it may be that was out. And that's the ultimate. That's why I always feared teams that were dangerous, because they were getting bodies in. Someone else had maybe an unexpected role thrust on them, and they're able to maintain that role and add to their game. And, you know, that's why when you see a team, you know, I would still fear a team like Colorado, who's had so many guys with such low mileage this year. Because if you get a Landeskog back and he plugs in, well, so much has been expected of Rantanen or JT Compher, who now bumps down in the lineup. So that is a phenomena that I've never been able to explain. I don't think anybody's been able to explain. And it's almost like I've got to be better, so I'm better because someone's out. And my argument as a coach is, why don't you just be better all the time when he's in as well? And, you know, it seems to make more sense that way, but it's not the case.
You know, I have to mention Morgan Barron. And I mean, Adam Lowry, I think most of us thought from what Rick Bowness had to say after Saturday night's game that Adam Lowry was going to be out and you were going to be down 2 of your most important centers behind Mark Scheifele. That wasn't the case. And that line was so impactful yesterday. And Morgan Barron in particular, Dave, over the past week and a half, almost when Nemetsnikov came. Remis and I were talking about before that Edmonton game back at home when Nemetsnikov made his debut and played with Lowry and Barron. they have looked like a different line. Now, since then, Nemetsnikov's moved up and taken Dubois' place at center, and Mason Appleton's got his ride back, and that might have been Mason Appleton's best game of the season. But in particular, we've talked about Adam Lowry a lot, but Barron and Appleton, contributions of players like that in the bottom six that, have very challenging matchups on the other side of the rink, what that does for a team and how you get onto a bit of a run for players in that role. And I mean, when I think back of great playoff teams, those are the teams that have third lines that can obviously take care of things defensively, but also contribute offensively. And it seems like maybe for this Winnipeg Jets third line, that's starting to happen.
You think about big goals in key games, be it a Game 7 in Tampa, Toronto, where Nick Paul gets 2 goals. And that's exactly what you're talking about. But Morgan Barron is a result of something I've spoken about before in the show. And I think the first time I addressed it was in the Trouba trade, when you got sort of an unknown defenseman named Neil Pionk with the first-round draft pick. And in this case, Barron comes over in the Cop deal. And there wasn't a lot known about Morgan Barron at that point. And, he'd been at Cornell. He played in the minors. He'd had a cup of coffee in the NHL. That's just excellent scouting by both your pro and amateur guys. And it's the combination of conversation that has to go on between them, because you have to go back to your amateur guys and say, okay, where do we have Barron in the draft? Okay, why did he go where he went? Knew he was going to college, spent his time at Cornell, comes out. What do we think of now? What's he done in the American League? What's his upside? And that information all goes into the blender, and you come out and say, in the Cop deal, we've got to get a kid named Morgan Barron in the deal. And because a team is desperate and they're in the playoff mode, they're going to give him up at that point, much easier than they give him up in the summer. So I like that aspect of it. But he's a big guy, moves well, and he's done what you asked him to do. The reason that he's important is because as a Jets team can play in different type of playoff series, I think he brings a little bit more to a heavier series. And depending on who, in a perfect world, who you end up with in the first round, you go ahead, you make the playoffs, you make the first round and say, okay, who's our opposition? Now you start planning. I think Barron's a versatile guy that gives you a piece of a heavier game.
Well, and he hasn't been a real rough player, but has certainly got into it. And I think as the energy in these games and maybe some of the physicality steps up, I mean, that's an invitation for him to do that as well. But Dave,
he'll benefit too, Andrew. He'll benefit from watching Nino Niederreiter and watching where that big body goes around the net and watching how he hangs out. And, I'd put a special assignment on Morgan Barron and say, just watch where Niederreiter goes around the net.
Well, speaking of Niederreiter, and maybe you can touch on him and just what an addition he's been to the Winnipeg Jets, because I mean, if you break down every trade that was made, the value the Jets got for Nino Niederreiter for a second-round pick with an extra year might have been at the top of the list. But Dave, you followed this league for a long time in a number of roles. The one thing that stood out to me about this deadline, now that we can look back at it, and it speaks to what you were just mentioning about the playoff style and how the game is different, is the price that teams were willing to pay for players, maybe without the offensive pedigree, but with major two-way games and physicality. And I think back to the haul that Nashville got for Tanner Jeannot, which nobody saw. And then what Buffalo ended up paying for Jordan Greenway. And obviously Minnesota having Ryan Reeves, maybe it was a little bit more. But I mean, you were talking about, it was a second and a fifth for a 2-goal player for Greenway. The Jets got Niederreiter for a second. Can you explain, what do you make of the premium that certain teams are paying for tougher, more physical players at the deadline, and why are they doing that?
I think it goes back to some specific additions that have made that have had huge factors. And you look at Tampa Bay, and it started with Barclay Goodrow and Blake Coleman. When those two prices were paid respectively to San Jose and Jersey, everyone raised their eyebrows and said, you've got to be kidding me. But there was control left on contracts, and they played a specific role. And you think of that line, what they did in those playoff runs with Yanni Gourde, and it was the perfect complementary third line. And, Julian Griswold went out and did it again with Nick Paul. He did it with Brandon Hagel. They set a price, so he did it with Tanner Jeannot. Now, there's been a lot of study lately on the impact of the draft. And, if you really look at a team deep down and say, one of the things I do is when I do my rosters for games, how many guys did you draft and how many are trades? And, if you look at the Jets defense, virtually, a number of them were traded for. Sandberg was a draft who went to college. Morrissey was obviously a draft, and the other guys were all trades. And so when you start looking at it like that, you're saying, okay, what's the value of a draft pick? And a draft pick to Julien Brisebois, who is building around a specific set of guys who've won him 2 cups, by the way, and gone to the finals a 3rd time. And, a first-round draft pick in a year or two is not going to play, arguably, with Steven Stamkos at his best. And so that's how you wait it out. But Nashville's an interesting case of subtraction. You think of their subtraction, Niederreiter, subtracted Jeannot, you subtracted Michael Granlund, you subtracted Matthias Ekholm, you don't have Ryan Johansson, and you're one of the hottest teams in the league right now. And, so what you did do is name a new general manager for next year in Barry Trotz, but it's remarkable to me, there's always a team that subtracts that now gets, for whatever reason, the right mix of guys in the locker room and on the ice, and looks at each other and says, well, clearly our management team doesn't think we're going anywhere, but what about us? What do we think? And that gets to be a dangerous team.
Well, Nashville is that team right now, although, still 6 points back of the Jets. But, it does seem like for the contending teams and teams that have been in the playoffs before, that have had great victories, that have had losses, there is a real premium to be paid on those players with a physical edge to their game. And I think it caught some people surprised with some of the prices that went out, but there's a reason for that.
Different types of games. It enables you to play in different types of games. The Leafs did it absolutely. Not only Ryan O'Reilly, but Noel Acciari would be one that you would mention, but they've tried this before in Toronto, and it, you've got to fit those guys in as well.
Yeah.
And you've got to make them a part of things. But they're important guys in the playoffs because the game's a little bit different in the playoffs, Andrew. And you're playing the same team over and over again. And if you get into a series that doesn't fit your style of play, you're not going to last very long. And sometimes it's that specific matchup. And that, there's like Brendan Dillon will be more valuable in the playoffs than he is. He's a very good regular season player. He's more valuable in the playoffs because they're going to let him play a little more Brendan Dillon type of game. And, he's going to be allowed to clear out the front of the net just a little bit more. And the opposition knows that, and they get a little more reluctant to go there when that's allowed. So that's why that type of game, you're hoping that, a Nino Niederreiter, he doesn't care. He's going in front of the other team's net. He doesn't care who's there or who thinks they're going to move him out. He's going there. And he's proven that he's going there. And that's when I referenced Morgan Barron as, someone who watches a Niederreiter sitting on the bench and watches and says, that power play goal he scores the other night that's a front of the net goal. He's in the crease when he bangs that in.
Well, we spend a lot of time obviously talking about Niederreiter, but I'll tell you what, Nemetsnikov had himself a weekend as well.
Yeah.
A couple goals. And this is a guy that was supposedly coming in as a depth player in the bottom 6, a 4th liner. He's playing important minutes on the second line, is scoring, and he's got a level of defensive responsibility that I'm not sure a lot of people knew that he had that club in his bag, but it's been on display a number of times, and I'm sure it's been putting a smile on Rick Bowness's face.
The one person on our panel who sort of lit up over that was Mike Johnson. And on trade deadline day, he said that's a really, really sneaky good pickup for Winnipeg because he was a little bit under the radar. He'd been moved, and he does have the first round pedigree and has played different roles in different places. And sometimes you just get him at a perfect time in his career. And I think maybe that's what happened. But even being able to step up short term and fill a bigger role. And then now this is what's going to happen. Dubois comes back. Nemesnikov drops back down in the lineup. If that's your 4th line center in the playoffs, after Scheifele, Dubois, and Lowry, man, you're in good shape. You're in really good shape because you have no qualms about running 4 lines out there.
Well, and he was playing with Lowry and Barron when he first came into the lineup. And I think, with the way things looked last night, maybe they keep Appleton there, but certainly a few more options for Rick Bowness. Listen, Dave, before we go, I know you did the Ottawa-Calgary game last night. And we haven't really been focusing very much on the rest of the West. It's been about the Calgary Flames and a little bit the Nashville Predators because of where the Jets were. Obviously, their playoff situation looks a lot better after the 2 wins on the weekend, and that tough loss for Calgary at home to the Ducks. But what did you see at Calgary? What do you make of their situation right now and this playoff race for that final wild card that right now I guess the Jets are a point up on Colorado if they got the 3 games. But Calgary is the team that we really have thought that, might have the ability to make a real push. Do you believe in them? And what did you see from them last night coming off that tough loss at home?
Well, Jacob Markstrom was really good when he had to be at certain points of that game last night, and he's a huge part of that team. And if he's playing like he has played in the past, you're not asking somebody to do something he hasn't done. He's done it, but he hasn't done it this year with consistency. And they're a team that we talk about pieces all the time. And Jonathan Huberdeau, is he going to end up with half of the number of points that he had last year? And you're certainly not, you say, okay, it's going to take him time to adjust. It's the first time he's been traded. Don't forget, he wasn't the one asking to get out of Florida. All of a sudden he's out of Florida. And it has really taken him time to find his game. And, he scores a goal last night. Kadri had a couple of assists last night. But the new pieces there, as well as they looked in the summer, if you think about the 2 GMs in the summer, you could have said had the best summers. You'd say it was Brad Treliving who rebounded from losing, the guys that he lost in Gaudreau and Kachuk and Pierre Dorion. What added DeBrincat and added Talbot and brought Claude Giroux in, and yet it doesn't always work out. And in Ottawa's case, Giroux has been a magnificent find. And you would say, well, you were hoping for more from DeBrincat. So just as Calgary is hoping for more from Huberdeau. And it hasn't worked out. There's still time left, but it's getting shorter. They're in a games played situation as well. If you're Winnipeg, you just worry about yourself, and you don't even don't look askew. Just look down at the schedule and say, here's what we've got in front of us, and here's the next game.
Well, speaking of that, the next game as they run the gauntlet through this road trip is the Carolina Hurricanes, the one team in the East that didn't make the massive big swings at the deadline, adding Gossip-Spare and Puljujärvi. Not sure how much you've seen of Carolina lately, but they're not a team that we get a lot on television, Dave. Just before we go, what should the Winnipeg Jets be ready for tomorrow night, and what should Jet fans look forward to on this finale before the team comes home to take on the Boston Bruins?
They're good. They're quick. They play really hard. They play well without the puck. I think they were looking to get a little heavier, maybe for the playoffs, and that's why they were in the Timo Meier deal, to try and change the makeup of their team. They knew it would have cost them somebody, and they chose not to make the deal, or Jersey outdid them on the back end of the deal. They're not sure who's playing net for them. And if you look, it's kind of weird, the young kids' numbers are really good, but if look at the number of games played, I think it's 23, 22, and 21 for their 3 goaltenders. So I don't think at this time of year they're even sure who their number 1 guy is. You might say, well, it's Freddie Anderson. Is it Freddie Anderson? Or they want Kochetkov to play, or is it Antti Ranta, who's had a terrific year? So that's the one variable with Carolina. I like their team. I love the way they play. I'm not sure who their goalie is in the playoffs.
Strange things about Carolina is that after everything they've done this year, they've been shut out on back-to-back nights, and all of a sudden they get a Connor Hellebuck that looks a lot more like Connor Hellebuck than the guy that had a few ups and downs over the last couple of weeks. Dave, a great day to talk to you. We're feeling a little bit better right now, but it's going to be a continued push to the playoffs. Can't wait to do this again real soon, and we'll look forward to seeing you on TSN this week. Thanks so much.
Enjoy the hockey, Andrew.
All right, great stuff as always with TSN's Dave Poulin. Jeff Hamilton coming up in just a second. Got to give a big shout out to our friends over at Royal Sports. I have a feeling there might be a few Jet fans that are rolling into Royal to get a number 62 Niederreiter jersey. What a great addition he has been. And hell, Vlad Mesnikov had a big weekend as well. Whether you're looking for a 7 or a 62 or your favorite Jets player, Royal Sports has you covered with all the jerseys, including the new retro reverse, names, numbers, get it all for you. And listen, if you're not looking for a jersey, but just some other Jets merchandise, Royal Sports is the best store you've ever been to when it comes to that. Thousands of pieces of Jets merchandise, tons of exclusives, not to mention Winnipeg Blue Bomber gear from around the National Hockey League, NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA, international soccer, and more. Snowboards, boots, bindings to get you ready for spring break, and still the undisputed undefeated heavyweight champs of all things hockey. Great late season deals as well in the stick department, including 50% off on a number of Warrior makes and models. Royal Sports, 750 Pembina Highway. Check them out on Instagram as well at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. Fellas, if you're looking to upgrade your wardrobe game heading into spring and summer, you need to talk to Andrew and the gang down at F Apparel at 190 Smith Street downtown. The leaders in custom clothing and suits for men, with those custom suits starting at just $400. The entire process was a breeze. We popped down, figured out what color we want, which fabric, styles, get measured up, and a few weeks later, you got a beautiful new suit, custom made to fit by the experts over at F. More than just suits, though. Custom shirts, tucked and untucked, golf pants, chinos, so much more. Best selection of men's accessories as well. And fellas, if you're in a wedding party, 15% off for the entire wedding party when you get your suits at F Apparel. And if there's a 2023 grad in the audience or in the family, hook the young man up with a brand new custom suit, and F Apparel will throw in a custom shirt and tie valued at about $150. F Apparel, make an appointment online at that's EPHapparel.com, or pop down and see him at 190 Smith Street. And tell you what, it's going to be a busy week. Big Jet games Tuesday and Thursday, as well as the weekend. We've got AEW on Wednesday. Might be a great spot to get together with the gang at your local Boston Pizza to watch the games. If you're not going to be at the venue, at least Thursday night when the Boston Bruins are town, no better place to watch the Winnipeg Jets than BP. Devour those delicious Boston's wings, gourmet pizzas, ice cold schooners, and more. And if you're staying home, you can always get the great taste, including some of their new feature menu, online at bostonpizza.com. All right, let's get the hammer in here. Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press joins us now. What's going on? How was your weekend?
My weekend was good. Had it off. I was not feeling too great over the weekend, but, managed to take some me time. And certainly it was, it went too quick. I can't believe it's Monday. Good news is I have today off, and I'm back at it tomorrow. Actually getting back early. I was supposed to have tomorrow off, but the Bombers and the CFL decided to have some kind of announcement tomorrow over some little thing or whatever.
Yeah, a little event that might be here in 2025. Well, I mean, listen, the Jets had a great weekend. We'll get to that in a minute, but why don't we quickly start on that? I know you reported it earlier. We've been expecting the Grey Cup to be coming back to Winnipeg, and it sounds like tomorrow was going to be the date where that is made official.
Yeah, you don't have the CFL and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers team up for a press conference, and then invite the premier and the mayor and every other minister of sport that they can toss in, and not have some kind of grandiose news. Look, these
aren't just their takes on the off-season editions, and
maybe
their thoughts on Kenny Lawler coming back to Winnipeg.
Reveal. These are new jerseys. This is essentially going to be putting a stamp on the Winnipeg taking over the 2025 Grey Cups and celebrations. And then, as anyone who's been following along, I think Winnipeg was, I don't know if disappointed is the word, probably a bit disappointed that they didn't get it in 2024. The way it works now is teams now bid for the games. It doesn't go to just whoever hasn't had it for a long time, as it has been done for forever. And so, up against the BC Lions team that has Amar Doman as their owner and has been very much like a Wade Miller in a lot of respects, in the sense that he puts a lot of work and effort and time into the game day experience. You knew he was going to also have a great package for the CFL, and ended up winning the 2024 bid. So it just felt inevitable that, given all the effort and time and money that the province and city was willing to give as part of Winnipeg's bid, that they would get the next one. So almost feels a little bit too soon to be announcing it, but I guess they want to create the buzz and get things going for what should be a great celebration, of course, after the next two Grey Cups, which is Hamilton this year and then BC 24 before arriving in Winnipeg.
Well, I mean, listen, I think it fits in with the I think Winnipeg deserves it. I think as a host city, we're a place where the Canadian Football League really means something. Winnipeg's at the top of the list. We all know about the success of the team over the last few years. And, man, now we can start thinking about, and again, we're going to win the Grey Cup this year and next year, but that will be a huge, huge year for the football team, with the potential of maybe playing in the big game on home turf for the first time ever. Obviously, we'll look forward to you reporting on all of that tomorrow. We'll hear what comes out of the presser. But let's get to the weekend for the Winnipeg Jets. I was pretty clear. I mean, this was a crisis, if you ask me, Jeff. I mean, the team hadn't played well for an extended period of time. All the gains that they'd made in the first half of the season had just about been erased. And then they hit the road after 2 disappointing losses where they actually played quite well at home and get 4 massive points against Florida and the Tampa Bay Lightning. What did you think about the team's play on the weekend and the bottom line, which was getting maybe the 2 most desperately needed wins in a long, long time that I can remember?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it looked better. It's been looking better for a bit now, couple games, and it certainly. I think you could even argue that the Jets played better leading into this trip, even than on Friday or on Saturday. Sorry, and again last night. But got the results, and I'm certainly impressed with taking getting those points. And the biggest takeaway for me in this, in these last 2 games, outside of improved structure, outside of rising to the occasion with adversity against the Tampa Bay Lightning, was with putting together even something as small as a 2-win run here, you're no longer in the conversation about fighting for that wild card spot, right? One of the 2 wild card spots. You're now in the conversation of being in the top 3 in the division, and you keep your hopes alive for that, and maybe, just maybe, this is an opportunity for Winnipeg to go on a little bit of a run. Now that's going to be very tough here with Carolina Hurricanes up on tap here to close out the 3-game road trip, and then of course having the mighty Boston Bruins show up in Winnipeg in your first game back, and then back on the road. But certainly an opportunity to inject some good feelings, maybe some reminiscence of earlier in the season, particularly last night's game, and the fact that you're losing Josh Morrissey. I don't think a lot of people have you to win that game, even though Tampa Bay played the night before. I think that's a tough one to win, to be able to carve out that victory against a good Tampa team, one that, mind you, has been struggling of late, but is still a solid team and is playing on home ice. To go out there and get the victory, hold on for the victory, I think was a massive piece for this team's confidence, and certainly some things along the way. I mean, when we talked on Monday, Huss, last week, it was, getting some of those good feelings in. Okay, that's check, because winning matters, and winning, breeds more winning. And just, again, lets guys kind of take a bit of a deep breath and not have to answer questions after every practice and game on what went wrong and what part of this period sucked and why is the power play brutal and what happened to the penalty kill. Well, I thought, some of those things were rectified over the weekend. Now, start with the penalty kill, just in the sense that they struggled against the Panthers, allowed 3 goals against, and I think, and then came up massively against Tampa, particularly on that 62 seconds of 5-on-3. I mean, Connor Hellebuyck has a lot to say for that, to be sure, but certainly a great rebound from them, and then a power play that came alive. I know they allowed a shorthanded goal, but they needed an injection of confidence more than anybody else. And I'd heard you talking to Dave, in last segment. It's a great point. It's tough to get out of a funk in power plays sometimes, because teams are kind of finding out what you're doing. It's the most scouted part of your game. And when people talk about pre-scouts, usually they're talking about, of course they're going over 5-on-5 play, but that's certainly more fluid outside of, maybe breakout systems or forechecks. If you really want to get a pulse on a team, if you really want to get an idea of what a team's doing, it's the special teams. And so I think that was certainly weighing on this team, certainly with all the changes on the power play, for them to finally get something going. I think that was a massive boost. And then I kind of alluded to it, but Connor Hellebuyck, let's face it, he needed a game like yesterday, and he needed to come up big. He needed to have, he need to give his team a chance to win with timely saves, things that we've seen him do for much of the season. So all things considered, I think this was it's certainly a great start for the Winnipeg Jets, and at least for now changes the narrative here of how this team's bleeding, and then there's no way they're going to make the playoffs, and here come the Calgary Flames. Putting together back-to-back wins on back-to-back nights certainly helps change all that.
Well, exactly. And I tweeted this last night. I mean, I can't remember 2 wins that this team needed so badly. At times, I mean, I remember when the team was really struggling a couple years ago at the end of the year. And it was very late in the season, and it was a shortened season. But they got that win against Paul for the Paul Stastny 1,000 game, and that sort of just eased the temperature around the club. But I mean, there was no other way to put it, Jeff. I mean, the team hadn't been playing well. They hadn't been getting results. They played a little bit better last week, but we were at a point in the season where there's no style points. There's no consolation prize for playing well if you don't get the points. And then you looked at the schedule going forward, back-to-back in Florida, Carolina, Boston, with what Calgary was playing. And there was a very realistic chance that if this team didn't do what they did on the weekend, you could be talking about a team that was literally at the playoff line or potentially behind them later on this week. So you're exactly right. And I think it gets some good feelings back in the room. It helps with the confidence. And I mean, individually, there were some big things that happened. Nikolai Ehlers scoring against the Panthers. And I'm not sure if you saw it. The TV had a pretty good camera shot of him close up. And he basically just exhaled and said, "It's about effing time." So you could tell that he was really feeling it. Kyle Connor didn't score. Mark Scheifele did, though, a couple. Connor's been getting his chances. And maybe most importantly, as a group, that power play unit did click because, as we've mentioned, there have been some points in the standings left on the table that wouldn't have been if the Jet power play could click. And special teams are such a big part of, winning and getting points right now. The penalty kill, for the most part, has done that. But on a night where the penalty kill wasn't up to their usual standard, it was the power play in a lot of ways, and some of the top guys that had been a little cold that ended up being difference makers, and that's huge for Winnipeg.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've talked about this for weeks now. If your top guns aren't going to be scoring 5-on-5, that's a problem. It's particularly an issue when they're not scoring 5-on-4 or 5-on-3 on the man advantage. I mean, that's essentially what you get paid for. And if you can't be scoring when you have more players on the ice, your value is certainly going to be questioned and or at least criticized moving forward. And I mean, I know there's a lot of talk about the bottom six and the depth scoring, how that kind of dried up. I mean, to your point, yeah, there was a resurgence from the top line. They carried the Jets against in the Florida game. And then what happened against Tampa? The bottom six shows up. Guys decide that they're going to chip in. And Morgan Barron finally makes good on a glorious opportunity, right? I mean, I'm sure I would have loved to see his heart rate monitor on the bench when they went and reviewed the play for goaltender interference, because I think he's probably thinking, "Are you kidding me? Finally finish on an opportunity here, and now they're reviewing it." I don't know where your head was at. I think the call was the right call to confirm the play. I just, with what we've seen in the past, I felt like even that little bit of contact in the blue paint, regardless of it, I think they identified Vasilevsky sliding over to the right and not being in a position to kind of to get back to his feet and make that save. I think that was the ultimate, decision or factor in the decision. But, the fact that he's able to make good. And, I think it was an all around injection of life into this team, whether it's, from the goaltending to the blue line. I mean, that with Josh Morrissey out against Tampa, that blue line, knew they had to up their game, knew they had to make the most of their opportunity. For guys like Dylan Sandberg, who, I've been in and out of the lineup, and, I think I'm with a lot of people that don't necessarily agree with how often he's been taken out of the lineup. It's certainly not an indictment, in my opinion, of his play. But, for him to take advantage of that role with Dylan DeMello and play the way he played and log more minutes, I think he got close to 18 minutes in Sunday's game. I mean, that's part of the everyone pulling on the same rope mentality that we saw earlier in the season. I don't know if they need to dust off that pledge that they signed in Banff and whatever, or just look at these last two games. But that's what I felt from these last two games, was a complete team effort that, if one line wasn't going at a certain point, there was another line that was stealing momentum, and vice versa as the game went on. And, like I said, whether it's the goaltending, the blue line, forward, special teams, that's the injection of the boost that they needed. And they needed against decent teams. Like, you can make this statement that, Florida is, they're obviously trying to fight their way into the Eastern Conference playoffs, and Tampa Bay certainly has been playing their best, but they're still good teams. And, they demand that you play they play your structure. And I think that's one of the silver linings, and not just what we've seen the last 2 games, but what we're going to see here coming up here is playing against teams like the Boston Bruins and the Carolina Hurricanes force you not to cheat the game. And I think that's what the Jets need. I mean, of course, they need victories in this, but I think they need some consistency in their play. And when you play against top-end teams that don't allow you to kind of run roughshod, like, a team like Edmonton Oilers, I mean, they're a good team, but they're a team that if you want to play wide open hockey and you want to go back and forth in a shootout, they're more than willing participants. They have they're similar to the Jets in that respect, where they have a little bit of a lack of discipline in the structure of their play. When you play against top-end teams like Carolina and Boston, they don't just force you, they demand you to play within your structure and will take advantage of you if you don't. So that's the kind of benefits I see in the next 2 games in particular here. I know they're tough opponents. We know the Jets historically aren't that great at the end of road trips, so it's going to be a tough go in Carolina. Carolina is also going to be an honorary team of given what they've, given their performances of late. So
they've been shut out in back-to-back games.
Yeah, so they're not going to be happy. So, I mean, and Boston, we've seen what Boston's done. So I think it's just going to up the Jets game, and win or lose, I think we're going to have a more consistent club here, one that's going to get ready and knows to what level they need to play here as we get down to the final, what are we at, 15 games here? By the time they get home, be 14 by the end of next week, it'll be less, of course. So this is the stretch. This is when you gotta turn things on. And while you'd love to go into the playoffs winning your last 10 games, if you can put together a good record, but more importantly have your game where you need it to be, I think that's gonna bode well for you in the final stretch here as you try to jockey for your position in the playoff in the standings.
I mean, as I said, I promised to put a positive spin or positive face on for Friday's show after we were pretty all disappointed on Thursday. And I did say, and again, we were looking at, best case scenarios for this trip. And one of those was that, these daunting teams like Florida, Tampa, Carolina, Boston actually brings out the best of the Winnipeg Jets. And I mean, I think the energy, the compete level, especially last night, was exactly what Rick Bowness was hoping to see out of his club. And they got the results, most importantly, and are now feeling a little bit better going into this game tomorrow against Carolina. Last week we spoke coming out of the trade deadline, and obviously there were many differing opinions on what the Jets and the general manager should have done in and around the deadline. Some thought they should sell. Some thought that they should be mortgaging tons of future assets. And listen, everyone's going to have their own take on it. We know what did happen. All that being said, man, have those 2 acquisitions made by Cheveldayoff panned out. I mean, Niederreiter has been arguably the Jets' best and most consistent forward since he got here. Mm-hmm. And holy smokes, did Nemesnikov show how versatile he is, playing up in the top 6 in the absence of Pierre-Luc Dubois and making a huge impact on the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's been this narrative that, the play of, Nino Niederreiter and Nemesnikov is somehow, I don't know, like all of a sudden people should be looking at the trade deadline as some kind of victory. I think there's certainly great pickups. I agree with you wholeheartedly on Nino Niederreiter being, the forward that's setting the example right now, particularly, whether it's from a scoring perspective or really just a give a crap meter. I mean, I think that's what they brought him in for, was a guy who was going to be consistently hard to play against, that, played a heavy game, that, got in people's grills, brought in some of that emotion, right? I think right immediately from his first game, I mean, it was a bit of a questionable hit in that LA game, but that got the team riled up. I mean, this team needs to be forced into emotion. They're not a team that goes out there and runs guys. They're not like, I think we talked about this before about the drop in hitting over time. They were a heavier team earlier in the season when they had a lot of their, a lot of guys out or injuries and were forced to kind of play deeper in their depth chart. But, Nino Niederreiter is certainly, has come as advertised. And I think his addition was celebrated as a good move. Nemesnikov, not as much, but was still viewed as a positive move for the Winnipeg Jets, in the fact that it was going to boost their bottom 6. And now here he is, highlighting, on the top 6 and playing extremely well. My point in that is not so much that somehow that should change the narrative of the trade deadline. I mean, those are pieces that you didn't have to give up the farm for, didn't have to make a big splash.
Also depending on who you're talking to. Very different narratives.
For sure, but I think a lot of people, I think most people still were disappointed, and I think this might even add to their disappointment in some ways, right? Because these two players are panning out. They are panning out. Why wouldn't you get more? Right? They wanted more than this. This was the complementary piece of the bottom six, a key for, Nino Niederreiter is a great player and he's playing extremely well, but he wasn't one of the high-end players on that board. If you were to get more players, if added another, get a D-man, look, the way the Jets are configured right now, they're not a Stanley Cup contender. I'm sorry, Nemestikov and Nino Niederreiter, and I don't want to burst this positive
Okay, let me ask
here,
you this, though.
They're not
Do you
Stanley
think
Cup
that there was
contenders.
someone available that made the Jets a Stanley Cup contender?
I don't know. I wasn't in those rooms, Haas.
But anyone that was traded. I mean, we talk about all the big guys, Chychrun, Timo Meyer.
Yeah, you don't think the Winnipeg Jets getting Jacob Chychrun would be a better team right now, along with Nino Niederreiter and Nemestikov?
No. But the question is, does that make them a legit Stanley Cup contender? And when I look at the East, I mean, I certainly wouldn't be making that argument.
Oh, for sure. But I think that makes them a contender in the West. You know what I mean? They don't have to. Lucky is they don't have to go through the East. They're a Western team, so they don't. I think that like we talked to the narrative going into for the Jets heading into the trade deadline was how the West was the wild West. It was up for grabs, and so it's great that these two pieces hit. That Nemestikov's playing well, and it's going to be very interesting when Pierre-Luc Dubois comes back in the lineup where you put him, or if you move him from the top six. And Nino Niederreiter, same thing as advertised, playing a heavy, great game. Adding another high-end guy, I mean, whether or not you want to call them contenders or not, it's certainly moved more in that direction than where they are now, because as they are now, I mean, they're, they might do well, but they're literally leaning on the two guys that they brought in, for at the deadline. I mean, that's nothing to take away from Mark Scheifele, who played a great game over the weekend, and other guys, but I'm just not like there's so much hype from these two guys, and for me, I mean, I look at this as being, two great pickups to be sure, and Cheveldayoff deserves credit for that. But at the same time, if you would have got another piece, that would have put the Jets in a better spot, because as good as these two games
a better spot right now. But here's the thing, and I mean, I haven't changed my opinion on this at all. As great as these guys have been, and as much as I think have raised the player, like these guys don't come in for free. I mean, Ottawa traded their first-round pick in this year's draft, 2 second rounds, and everyone was shocked at how low that price was. Well, then we found out they turned down a couple other offers for multiple first-round picks because they wanted a high pick. The Jets just didn't have that one right now. Obviously, there was a lot into Meyer, and Meyer would have been interesting. He, like Niederreiter, has team control for one more year, and I think there is an option that, if he's not going to re-sign with you, you can turn around and trade him before that. But the bottom line is, where the Jets were, I mean, I would have been nuclear if all of a sudden they went and started trading their first-round pick this year and a number of those top prospects, because everything comes with a cost. And I certainly wasn't in the position that I thought that, right now, where this team's at, the way they're trending, that you should be sacrificing future years for this year. And to be honest, Jeff, one of the things that's come out of, not getting that, well, we could say what we want. Niederreiter's probably been as impactful as just about anyone that's been acquired at the deadline so far. I mean, I guess Orlov's had a really good run. He had some massive points early on, but he's made those other players better. Like, you can bring in those guys, but nothing was happening with the Winnipeg Jets unless the majority of the roster started to play better and got back into a groove. And I'll say this, even when they were losing the games before, I think Niederreiter has been a driver that's made Scheifele and Connor more competitive right now. And Nemestikov has amazed me. He has amazed me because he started that first game against the Oilers last Saturday night, the game that they won, playing with Morgan Barron and Adam Lowry. Lowry scored. Barron, since that point, has looked like an entirely different player, even when he was off the line. And, sometimes, some fresh blood can actually come in and really, help in a number of ways. I still thought they might have added one more player for the bottom six. But I'll tell you what, a guy like Mason Appleton's really raised his game with one of his best games all season long. I think now with a little bit more competition. Bottom line is, I think the value of what the Jets gave up made a lot of sense. And but both of these guys, I think, have far exceeded anyone's expectations in the short time they've been here.
Yeah, I agree that to a certain degree. I mean, I don't think Nino Niederreyer's exceeded anyone's expectations. I think they expected him to come in and be heavy and play the way he's
20-goal scorer. He's basically been scoring every game. I mean, like, if he did this for an entire season, we wouldn't be talking about a guy that's traded for a second-round pick.
Great weekend and say if they did this for an 82-game season, that's like
he's only been here for 2 weeks. He's been doing it ever since he got here.
Well, I mean, but like, okay, fine. I'll give. He's gone above the expectations of the high expectations people had for him. But it's and that's a great thing. I guess my point here is, and you seem to like arguing with me about this, is that at the end of the day, the deadline. Like, sorry, man, it's awesome because they're probably going to they might sign Nino Niederreiter to an extension while he's older. They might sign Domestikov to an extension while he's older. That's going to be great when you don't have Connor Hellebuyck, you don't have Mark Scheifele, you don't have Pierre-Luc Dubois on your team. So what are you? Like, you're just a guy with a couple great additions. This was a window, man. This was the one window for winning the Stanley Cup. The Jets you think the Jets aren't contenders now? The Jets aren't going to be contenders in a year from now and probably for 5 years after that. So this idea that
so hold on a sec. Let's dive into that. So Jeff Hamilton has just told us on Winnipeg Sports Talk that Hellebuyck, Scheifele, and Dubois all gone.
I don't think you can look at it and say any of those guys will probably be back. Like I don't think you can say with a guarantee of any measurable, any measure of
let's
certainty.
Talk about Hellebuyck because I kind of agree about those other guys. I think
so
it's Scheifele.
You think Connor Hellebuyck is likely to come back here?
Well, let's talk about it because I wanted to bring this up. Elliot Friedman today on 32 Thoughts was talking about Hellebuyck, and he had said that by this time next year, he expects Hellebuyck to most likely be the highest paid goaltender in the National Hockey League. Mm-hmm. Now, I guess there's a possibility that it's not in Winnipeg because, they could trade him in the offseason. But considering that the Jets have him for one more year, he's going to be coming off another incredible season. He will, like the Jets, I firmly believe the Jets are going to get, I've been saying all year long, Connor Hellebuyck's next deal is going to be like a Carey Price deal. It's going to be 8 figures a year. It's going to start with a 10, and it will probably be 7 or 8 years. If that's on the table from the Winnipeg Jets this summer, how does he not take it?
You're asking me a reason why an American-born player who took issue and umbrance of having a vaccination here and seems to have and has a young family would want to live in the U.S.
Well, okay, put it that, but I didn't say that. I say,
you don't
how
think
do you
he get
turn
paid
down
that somewhere else?
Well, I guess if you go and have another great season, but. And I
so
mean,
you're saying if he doesn't have another great season, he's not going to get that money. The Jets are the only one who are going to be like in 1 year, his stock's going to plummet if he doesn't have a great season next year.
Think about the risk. Think about the risk involved in saying no. Ask John Klingberg how that worked. And I know it's a different situation, but Klingberg, he got a little greedy. They offered him 8 years at $8 million. He ended up signing 1 year for $7 million, then just got traded for a fourth rounder. I'm just saying, if you're his agent, what are you telling him?
Well, I'm not comparing him to John Klingberg, that's for sure. An offensive D-man.
I'm just saying, a guy that was going into his contract season had a lifetime set for life contract on the table, and said no, wanted more. And now, it's just a cautionary tale on not taking the money when it's available.
Oh, I think, but I don't think, so you think he's going to be scared into taking a long-term deal? Like,
I just think that if the Jets put forth a contract that he has earned, that, that pays him and makes him the highest paid goaltender in the National Hockey League, I think it'd be very hard to walk away from it.
Yeah, possibly. And maybe he does.
And to me, he's the most important one. Like, if Hellebuyck's here, I think the Jets are contending. Like, maybe not for the Stanley Cup, but I think they're a playoff team. And again, if that's the case, maybe you are trading Dubois, you're trading Scheifele, you're getting some young players in. You've got that cornerstone piece of your team that gives you a chance to win every single night. That's why, to me, the priority is Hellebuyck and then everything else. Because this story is very, like, put it this way, your doomsday scenario that you dropped of not contending for 5 years probably is very realistic if he's not around.
So so what do you think the team's going to look like if you're saying that Mark Scheifele and Pierre-Luc Dubois are gone? Who's coming in to suggest to Connor Hellebuyck that this team, without, you think he likes getting shelled in every night in net? You think that's, them losing their top 2 centermen is somehow going to convince him that money's the most important thing here? And that
these guys aren't walking away for nothing. These guys aren't walking away for nothing. I mean, ask me
that's what I mean.
Who they're getting back in trades.
Players come in? Do you think future picks come in? Like, we're playing hypotheticals.
Players.
What would be a
sure.
situation besides money? Because I don't think money is going to be enough. Describe a situation that Connor Hellebuyck is going to want to commit 8 years to Winnipeg.
Hey, listen, he's been in that dressing room for a long time. I'm not sure that if he thinks that he's a leader and is comfortable being here and believes that this team can do things, might not think that some changes of some of the top personnel might not be a good thing. I mean,
that's sure. Okay, say that's true then, but you still need players coming in to.
Here's the thing, though. I think that conversation with him happens before that. Like, to me, he's the number one priority. Would love to hear people's thoughts in the chat as well on this.
Who? I missed the last part.
I just said, I mean, to me, those conversations, like once they get to the offseason, regardless of what happens this year, the first thing on the long to-do list of Kevin Cheveldayoff is see what the story is with Connor Hellebuyck and whether you can get him signed.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't like Dubois. We've heard
number one priority. The issue is if you can lock down your number one priority and whether or not he'd want to commit 8 years, regardless of it being max money or the highest paid goaltender, to commit to Winnipeg. He's going to want to see some, he's put in his time here. He's been here for 8 years, whatever it is now. He's going to finish his contract here probably. Well, probably not unless they can re-sign him. But I mean, I'm just saying, what do you like? You need to convince him to want to be here and being like, hey, man, we're going to be a contender because you're in our net is not a selling point to a goalie. Like, it's a selling point to players. Be like, hey, we got Connor Hellebuyck in net. We're going to be contenders. Telling the goalie that, hey, so long as we can rely on you, like we've relied on you your entire career here.
I'm pretty sure that's not the pitch, Jeff.
Well, of course it's not. That's what I'm saying. Of course that's not the pitch. But you're not answering my question. What would have to be an ideal situation for him without convincing him? When I asked you that, you said, well, they're going to be a contender so long as he's in the net. Well,
listen, I don't think this team is garbage outside of Connor Hellebuyck. I mean, listen, we've seen them do good things before. We'll see what happens this year. I think they've got a lot of young talent coming in. I mean, the NHL is somewhat cyclical, but a player like Hellebuyck is a guy that you build your team around. And I think before, that hasn't really been the case. I mean, there's a lot of things. And I mean, I don't know him well enough. He seems to be one of the more interesting dudes that I've come across before. But I don't get the inkling at all that there's something elsewhere that Winnipeg just can't compete with. I mean, to me, I think that he needs to be rewarded as the franchise player that he is. And believe me, he is the franchise player here in Winnipeg. I don't think you're going to disagree with me on that.
Absolutely not. He's the most important player on this team by far.
For sure. So, I don't see anything that would prevent the Jets from giving him that king contract that you get once in an entire year. Not to mention the significant risk that goes with not taking that. I mean, to me, it's very different than all of those other players. And it is honestly the linchpin for what happens going forward. But, I mean, have we ever heard anything from Connor? This is not a Pierre-Luc Dubois situation in my opinion at all. I mean, I think they've got a better chance of doing it with him than either of those other guys. And I'm not even sure it's close, partly because I think they'll be willing to do exactly what it's going to take. And that's probably making him the highest paid goaltender in the National Hockey League. And I don't know if there's a lot of people that would disagree with that. We had a great conversation with Mike Kelly about it a few weeks ago from NHL Network. And he was sort of, mentioning the risk of signing players to contracts in and around 30 years and goaltenders. And the end result was you can't afford not to. And that's why, I mean, Like, I don't think that there's a huge sales job as far as like writing out the plan for the next 4 years. I think it's pretty simple. You see the way things that are going. There will be some changes. We've got some young players in, but this team will go as we go with you as our leader. Here's the check, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I know all that you said. I'm saying I think it's a no-brainer. I think what I'm suggesting is max deal, max term, max money is not going to be enough without more in there. And that more being, some kind of suggestion that this team's trending upwards. I don't think Connor Hellebuyck wants to go through a rebuild. Now, here's the interesting part in that is I don't think that the only way the Jets don't go into a rebuild and can retool is if they re-sign Connor Hellebuyck. That's the only. So
I agree.
So for him, it's not like you can give him more money. Like, I mean, I guess you can give him more money. Like, if you wanted to beat anybody else by a couple $1 million a year, yeah, you can be that. You could probably win it. I just don't think money is going to be enough. He makes a lot of money. He's going to make a lot of money no matter where he goes. And the comments I made about the COVID and US stuff, not about him being an anti-vaxxer. It's about Americans wanting to play in Canada, in the US. And this whole COVID has created a little bit of tension. Guys want to go back to the States. Trust me, I talked to a lot of them. COVID has changed their opinion of playing in Canada in a lot of respects. There's been articles written about it. This isn't some random thing I bring up.
2 years ago, for sure. Right now,
he's got a young child. Sure, he's got a young child too.
Like, to me, the taxes are way more of an issue than anything to do with
And there
COVID.
you go. There's taxes too, but I am just saying, to be like, this is our pitch. Like, we need to sign you so you can be our pitch to other players is not the pitch I think Connor Hellebuyck is looking for. I think he wants to have a core there. I think he wants to have a leadership group. I think he wants to be able to look into the future and know that this team is going to win, not in 3 years' time, not for the final couple years of his contract, not for the last half. Right now, he wants to win a Stanley Cup. He's won a Vezina. Okay, he's should probably have 2 Vezinas. He's done it. He's been an all-star. He's gonna go to the Olympics if they go back. He wants to win a Stanley Cup, and unless he knows he can win unless he has the confidence that he can win a Stanley Cup here, I'm sorry, but I don't think money is gonna matter at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still a lot to play for this year, especially when it comes to that situation. I mean, if this weekend was a complete mirage and they ended up blowing out the rest of the season and missing the playoffs, I think that makes it a lot more challenging. But I mean, if this team does make the playoffs and regardless of what happens, plays well, maybe they lose in the first round. Let's say they get to the second round and lose to Colorado Avalanche. Just take that. I think you're looking at a team that has made strides from the last couple very disappointing years. I mean, where they missed the playoffs, where they were out right away.
You just gave them a second round berth. Like, what do you mean? Let's go back and say they lose in 5 games in the first. Then what happens? What's to suggest they're going to be in the second round? I don't know how you can add that.
No, I didn't say that they were going. I said, let's say, given this scenario, they go to the playoffs and they don't get out of the division, but they lose in the first or second round. I'm not sure it's a massive difference. Yeah, it depends on the series. I think that
losing
would
in
be
the
a
first
trend
and second
forward.
round is a massive difference.
Okay, well,
especially if you're going to talk in the context of this team making strides towards doing things, losing in the first round again.
Well, they missed the playoffs last year. I mean,
Right.
So if they make the playoffs and are competitive in it, that is a step forward from last year, right?
Sure.
Okay, so that is what I'm saying. If that is the scenario, and it could be better, it could be worse. But I mean, I don't see any. I would be shocked if that would be okay. Listen, I'm out of here and I'm not re-signing again. I mean, if he's treated well, he's paid what he's worth. I think it would be negligent on the agent not to get that done. Because I mean, I think there are too many risks when it comes to injuries and those sort of things. When you're talking about a contract that's going to take you to the rest of the way, and I mean, listen. You don't think that if there was some concerns about where the team was going to be, that there wouldn't be, if I want out, if I want to get a trade in a few years, that could be talked about if they're not where they're at? Of course it could. But it's that security for the family and being paid. I don't think that he's not a competitive guy and wants to be the highest paid goaltender in the National Hockey League if he thinks he deserves it. I think that he has, and I certainly don't close the door on anything like that. And to be honest, I think considering how important it is to the Winnipeg Jets, if they can't get that done, it adds so many more issues to the club. And to be honest with you, looking at history, they haven't done a very poor job of when it comes to re-signing players. I know we can focus on Trouba, who wanted to trade, and obviously this Dubois situation. But other than that, in that room with guys that he's played his entire career, including himself with a pretty nice extension, they have been pretty successful with that, despite being in Winnipeg and despite all the naysayers saying that they weren't going to get it done with those players before.
I'm sorry. I guess to make one thing clear, I'm not closing the door on signing Connor Hellebuyck. I seem to have been playing devil's advocate to this particular. We've now found ourselves on two sides of the line. We both agree that Connor Hellebuyck is a top priority. If the Jets should be doing everything and anything they possibly can to sign him. I think they can sign him long term this summer. But I also think to your last comment about, okay, well, what has this core done? Like, what do you mean? Like, I don't think this core has suggested that they're on the brink of anything special or have been. I mean, they got one run under their belt, so there isn't like this. I mean, this is what we've been talking about for weeks, if not months, if not years, is that, there's we're talking about, Mark Scheifele is going to sign this massive deal. And, Pierre-Luc Dubois is going to sign this massive deal. And, all these guys are going to.
By the way, I sure as hell haven't been saying that. I don't think that's happening with either of those guys here.
No, I'm just saying in general, they weren't, not here or just anywhere. These guys are going to move on. This core is going to move on. They're going to sign elsewhere. They're going to sign big money. Well, okay, that's possible. And while each of them have had a lot of individual success, they haven't had a lot of team success. They haven't won anything. They went on one cool run in 2018. We talked about this last week, and they really haven't done anything. So you want to talk about improvements from last year? I don't think Connor Hellebuyck or any player in this core group that is looking at signing an extension, is looking at committing their future to this organization.
Let me ask you this, based on that, because I do hear that.
Let me finish. It's from last year to this year's improvement. They're looking at the time they've been here throughout the entire process, and they haven't done much of anything.
Well, I mean, they've made it to the conference finals. I mean, how many teams outside of the Avalanche that won the Cup last year in the West have done anything? I mean...
What do you mean outside of the West?
No, in the West.
Teams that make the playoffs continuously win rounds, there's not a ton of them, but they make moves and change. That's my point.
But there's no obvious teams. I hear that all the time. Well, hey, this team hasn't done anything. I mean, compare them to their counterparts. And again, the Avalanche won last year. They're the champs. Oilers made it to the conference finals last year, which was great. They haven't done anything other than that. Does that count for something? I would imagine it does in Edmonton, and it certainly did. Listen, we're getting far removed from 2018, and we've seen sort of the downward trend of this club for the last few years. I just think that this is another reason why this final 15 games and what happens in the playoffs, I think, will completely create the narrative around the club, because halfway through the season, this team was in first place. Well, if you continue on that stretch, it's a great season. You've done a lot. The last couple months and a half hasn't been that way. But again, I guarantee you this is not the last time we will be having this topic, because outside of what's happening on the ice right now, going into the offseason, the future of 37 is here at the top of the list for podcast listeners, and everybody else comes after that. And I don't know, it'll be very interesting to see what happens, because I think we are on the same page that if Hellebuyck is not going to sign, they need to maximize the value for him. That means he's not there. And that means, to your point, you are talking about a far different rebuild than potentially moving a few players, still having an elite goaltender, and having a chance to win every night. Hammer, this has been awesome, as always. You bring the best out of me. I try to give it to you. But you did some good devil's advocating today to
I don't even know how we went down this. I don't even know where the line of questioning went. I might have mentioned one thing and then we went in our, but I love debating you. I love
well, you said the next 5 years. You said the next 5 years they're rebuilding because all those guys are going, and it's not impossible.
It's not impossible.
It's definitely not impossible. But there's a lot of people that will take that narrative and say that, well, it's a done deal. This is the end of the road and that's it. And I also think it's very possible that that he's back and then they figure the rest out. What do you got cooking this week? Obviously the big Grey Cup thing tomorrow.
Hey, I'll take it back. I think Hellebuyck signs max deal. I think Pierre-Luc Dubois has a change of heart and doesn't want to go to Montreal. I think Mark Scheifele also takes a hometown discount, and the Jets win the Stanley Cup in 2025, the same year the Bombers go 5 for 6 in the Grey Cup, and Zach Claros rides off into the sunset. Is that better? Is that more online? I got the announcement tomorrow.
It's ridiculous.
I got a CFL.
It would be great if you were right,
Wednesday. But the CFL. Now you argue against it. The CFL column on Wednesday, and then Jets. Man, I'm off to Nashville for St. Patrick's Day, so that should be fun. Just in time for a Saturday day game.
Hey, it's an afternoon game.
And then
it's an afternoon game on Saturday. Just a heads up.
I know. I was just saying to get ready for an afternoon game, so I might just go straight from Tootsie's to Bridgestone Arena. It's a stone's throw away. Anyways, but yeah, I got that going. So I got a pretty busy week, and then I might stop off for a night in Montreal on Monday before coming home and covering Jets again. So we'll see.
Anything going on at the Forum that night? You should talk to PLD. Maybe his bank has a spot in the suite for you.
Yeah, I'm going to be checking real estate. I'm going to be calling real estate agents, seeing if any guys on the Habs have sold their home to him or renting it out or anything for the summer or anything like that. So I'll have my ears on the ground then. Thanks so much for bringing out the best / worst to me, Huss. Hey, always dude, a pleasure. I hope I can rile up the listeners and I appreciate them. Even if
we could do this for another couple hours, and maybe we will. Hey, listen, that was awesome, pal. Take it easy. Have a good one, and have a good trip. Put some things up on the gram.
Oh yeah, I'll do my best. Traveling solo these days. I think Kenny might be there with me, so that might be do a Kenny and Jeff roadshow thing, but we'll see. I'll certainly update you one way or the other, and I'm glad we can take some of these debates on air rather than just in person.
No doubt. Take it easy, dude. Thanks so much.
Take care.
All right, there is Jeff Hamilton. Pushing 500 in the chat. Folks, if you haven't already, hit that red subscribe button. Make sure you subscribe to the Winnipeg Sports Talk YouTube channel. And while you're at it, hit that thumbs up too. It would be great. By the way, stay tuned. We do have our AEW contest winner. We'll do that at the end of the program. Speaking, I mentioned the Brier. What an incredible run for Team Manitoba and Matt Dunstone falling just short to Brad Gushue's team last night. An absolutely legendary performance by Gushue. They had to be so good to beat Manitoba in what was an absolute classic. The Dunstone team, though, will be back. And we'll look forward to maybe catching up with Dunstone at the Princess Auto Players Championship in a few weeks out in April with 2 final Grand Slams still together. Of course, all of our curling reports brought to you by our great friends and great sponsors of curling in Canada, Princess Auto, where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. 2 Winnipeg locations, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West. And you can always shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. Our friends at Culligan Water they've celebrated over 65 years in business as the go-to people in Manitoba for all things water. They've got it all for you and your families. Water softeners, filters, bottled water coolers, whole home systems, and drinking water systems, not to mention citywide water delivery services and commercial and industrial water products and solutions. You can check them out and visit them in person at 1200 Sargent Avenue. Give them a call at 204-694-5180 and find out everything they can do for you, your home, your family, and business online at drinkculligan.com. Got to give a big shout out to our friends over at Canadian Club. James just let me know that the CC and Ginger, folks, is now available in 473 milliliter cans. They're available at liquor marts and at beer vendors. If you don't see it at your local spot, just ask for it. And hey, coming up from the 24th to 26th, flash sale at Manitoba Liquor Marts of the Canadian Club Classic 12-year on sale for just $24.29, regular $31.99 from the 24th to 26th at Manitoba Liquor Marts, just one weekend only. And coming up on Saturday, the limited re-release of the CC Chronicles 41-year-old. There's less than 100 bottles available. This is the 2019 release of the Chronicles series. They found some extra cases at the distillery in Windsor, so if you're missing this one for your collection, now is your chance. All right, let's get Remo back in here. And Remo, wow, great stuff with Poulin. Hammer and I got down a bit of a road, but, it is something I wanted to talk about after Friedman's mention of Hellebuyck and a potential contract for him on 32 Thoughts, in that it is going to be expensive, it is going to be long, but to me, it is the focus for Kevin Cheveldayoff at the top of his list amongst many things that'll happen regardless of the way this season ends.
Yeah, wow. The chat was like sitting back like in a circle while you and Jeff were going, they're going, fight. And like, I think some people were on Team Jeff, some people were on Team Hustler. You got compared to Skip Bayless versus Stephen A. Smith. That type of embrace debate.
Who was Skip?
That's a good question. I don't know. Which one was Shannon Sharp? I don't know, but I was entertained over here, so.
Well, listen, it's good. Hammer, I love having those conversations with Hammer. You should see us do it over a bar top and a few beers. And listen, sometimes, and I know he was kind of playing a little bit of a devil's advocate, but it does kind of piss me off sometimes where it's just assumed that everything is over for these guys. Now, listen, the Dubois thing's pissed me off for a long time. This goes back to last summer, and I'm sure many Winnipeg fans felt the same way with what his agent had said. And at a certain point, if a guy wants out and he doesn't want to stay, that's just the way it is. It happened with Jacob Trouba. It'll happen again. But to me, Hellebuyck is not that guy. I haven't heard anything would suggest that he wouldn't entertain, a true fair market value contract that rewards him for what he's done in Winnipeg. And to me, he's very different, but also more important and also needs to be done first, because I think after Hellebuyck, certainly that's going to affect your cap significantly for what you're going to have to pay him. It just affects so many things competitively for the club. And to Jeff's point, if in his original thing that I think got us talking about it, I mean, regardless of what happens with Dubois and Scheifele, if Hellebuyck is not here, it's just a totally different story for the Jets. And I mean, let's face it, it's not like there's any young elite goaltending prospects really that we've seen knocking on the door. I mean, the young guys with the Moose have been pretty good this year, but I think they're new. But this is very different than before Hellebuyck took over as the Jets goaltender, excelling at the American Hockey League, obviously being an NHL starter, and then getting the job and running with it for the last 6 seasons.
Yeah, I agree with you that they need him maybe more than he needs them. But if you offer him, a deal that makes him the highest paid goalie, a $10 million contract, really hard to turn that down. It's hard. So that's one of the things that's going to be fascinating. If you have Hellebuyck, you're a contender. If you don't have him, well, I think you got to start rebuilding. And is there going to be a full blown, I don't want to call it a fire sale, but a major remodeling here with the Winnipeg Jets with Dubois? He's an RFA, Scheifele 1 year away, Hellebuyck 1 year away, and Blake Wheeler as well. So, I mean, great debate. The chat really fired up. You see Team Huss versus Team Hammer. Everyone, I've never seen it so divided. It was very
listen,
even.
I'll give Jeff a lot of credit. And he's part of the reason why I love having him on the show as much as I do. Like legitimate debates. Embrace debate, as they say on First Take with my guy Stephen A. Some of the best debates that we've had have been with Jeff here on the program, and that I would say was one of them, and it won't be the last time we talk about Hellebuyck's situation. Right now, though, just enjoy what he did for the club on the weekend, bouncing back from a really tough week earlier, and an uncharacteristic down game for him on Wednesday against the Wild, and that bodes very well for the Jets going forward. Remo, before we get to the Coolbet lines and the winner of our AEW contest, a bunch of other things coming from the weekend. Did you watch the epic Canada-Great Britain game at the World Baseball Classic that may have set the sport back decades?
No, I'll be honest. I haven't watched any of the World Baseball Classic. I did see the Great Britain have these jerseys with Great Britain just written horizontally in Arial font. Maybe we thought Canada's jerseys were bad at this tournament, but Great Britain's I mean,
that jersey matchup. Speaking of setting things back decades, that jersey matchup between the two teams was I mean, I don't know what went into or who was. I guess there was an Under Armour jersey that Canada was wearing, but you would have thought they could have gotten some better kits for the fellas. Yeah, the great.
Like that's the worst jersey I've ever seen. It just says Great Britain written straight in. Usually like letters on a jersey when it has a team name is like on curved at least. This is horrible. Like put in an effort. Like who's
Anyways, Canada
these?
won an insane game, 18-8. Cal Quantrill, the guy that was going to be the ace of Canada, didn't get out of the first inning. They gave up 3 in the top of the first. They scored 5 in the bottom of the first and ended up winning 18-8 in 7. World Baseball Classic underway at venues around the world. Scotty Scheffler ran away with the Players' Championship yesterday on the PGA Tour. The run that he's on over the course of the last 14 months, truly one of the great stretches in golf history outside of maybe Tiger Woods. I believe 6 international wins in his last 23 starts, a Masters green jacket, and now a Players' Championship. Scotty Scheffler, unbelievable. And some big NFL news, Remo, that we should get to. And I guess we'll start off with the local story first. How about David Onyemata? The former Bison gets paid a 3-year, $35 million deal from the Falcons with $25 million guaranteed for the former Bison product, leaving the Saints to go to the division rival Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, wow. I remember when he was coming in studio, like, was it before or after he got drafted? He was a large individual with an incredible story coming here, spotted by Brian Dobie and recruited to play football while student at U of M. And now he's getting paid, $25 million guaranteed?
Guaranteed, yeah. 3 years, $35 million.
Oh, good for him. I hope he's partying tonight. That's so awesome to hear. So good for him. And I mean, I have nothing else to add, but yeah,
such a great dude and by the way, the Saints are now paying the price for all that dead cap money they have. They're going to lose Onyemata and probably 2 others from their line. There's been a bunch of other signings or agreements in the NFL, but the big news on Friday was the Chicago Bears trading the first overall pick in this year's draft to the Carolina Panthers. And Remo, the Bears got a haul. They get the 9th overall pick in the draft. They get the 61st pick in the draft. They get a 2024 first rounder, a 2025 second rounder, and DJ Moore, who's only 25 or 26 years old himself. You knew when Houston won that game at the end of the year and the Bears pulled into the first spot, having Justin Fields, that they were going to have some options. And I got to give the Bears credit. I think they did a hell of a job extracting a king's ransom for that number 1 pick when they already had their QB.
Yeah, I think the best part of the deal is them getting DJ Moore. They've needed a number 1 receiver. Well, they had they needed a receiver, for a while here, and DJ Moore, he can be that guy. And Justin Fields, he had some breakout games running the ball. He's a good thrower. So I do like that deal. And I've read that the Bears need to get to the salary cap floor, and adding DJ Moore's salary is pretty helpful for them. And just getting all of those picks when you already have your number 1 quarterback. Very well done for the Bears. And I don't know, is there a consensus number 1 pick this year in the draft? Like, I don't know is this the draft to be given all that?
There's 4 quarterbacks, and I mean, some teams will but they're basically 4 sort of elite quarterbacks. Bryce Young from Alabama was thought to be the number 1 pick. I've seen a number of mocks think that the Panthers are going to go with CJ Stroud from Ohio State. You had the kid from Florida, Richardson, I believe, that basically broke the combine with all of his measurables coming out of Florida. Who was the other guy? Will Levis, I guess, in Kentucky was another guy that they thought would be there. But anyways, 4 really top quarterbacking prospects. So the Carolina Panthers are going to get their guy, and I'm sure Frank Reich is happy about it. But a real changing of the guard in Florida or in Carolina over the course of the last 12 months. I mean, when you include the McCaffrey trade during last season. Couple other news. Fantasy god Austin Eckler going into the final year of his deal, has requested permission to find a trade, a team that will pay him. Jason Kelce is coming back for one more year, which was great. I don't think a lot of speculation that he was going to retire after the Super Bowl. NFL is a way better place with Jason Kelce in it. Jalen Ramsey traded to the Miami Dolphins on the weekend. And Remo, as usual, Aaron Rodgers cranking up the drama, making everybody wait, still without a decision on his future as the Jets try to find out whether he's in or out at coming to New York. And the Green Bay Packers seem to be more than willing to trade Aaron for probably a fraction of what they would have gotten last year from the Broncos.
Yeah, well, the Broncos worked out pretty well for the Seahawks, that trade. So Aaron Rodgers drama, I'm trying not to pay attention. We're kind of over it. It's like, just wake me up when there's a decision here made, right? I don't need to hang on Aaron Rodgers every word anymore, although it's kind of hard not to when you have him involved and New York Jets involved. You're going to be hearing about it, but it seems like this has been going on for a long time, and he's gotten more and more. He came out of his dark room. Do we know what happened after that?
Well, no, he was supposed to have an answer after the darkness retreat, and now apparently we're still waiting on that. So there'll be a lot more NFL news as we get through this week. And one other football news, NFL and CFL, of course, Remo, legendary coach of the Minnesota Vikings and Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Bud Grant, passed away on the weekend. And it sure was something to see, to hear the memories of so many that had dealt with Bud over the years. An absolute icon here in Winnipeg. And really the guy that Mike O'Shea is chasing for the best and most successful coach in Winnipeg Blue Bomber history.
Yeah, 95 years old, a tremendous outpouring of support there on social media, 102, 56, and 2 record in the CFL. Pretty impressive. He's got the statue at IG Field. I remember he gave the big speech after the unveiling there at a game. Legendary head coach, and it's definitely saddened to hear that news over the weekend.
He was such a tough SOB too. I believe it was the Vikings outdoor playoff game at TCF Field when it was like -20, and Bud Grant went out to do the, I believe it was the coin toss or something like that in short sleeves at 88 years old or whatever the number was. He was football guy till he died. RIP to the great Bud Grant, a real loss for both the Minnesota Vikings and the Winnipeg Blue Bomber community. All right, before we get to our AEW winner announcement, let's get to the Coolbet lines tonight. 3 games in the National Hockey League. We've got the Avalanche in Montreal to take on the Canadiens. Avs, a -248 favorite. The Leafs hosting the Buffalo Sabres, desperate Buffalo team if they're going to get back into the mix for a playoff spot. Leafs -234. And then we've got the Dallas Stars and the Seattle Kraken. And Remo, it's back on my week to do the daily pick for Coolbet Canada on their socials. And I think I'm taking a new tact on this. I'm just trying to find the overtime game every night. There was 5 OT games on Saturday, another 3 last night. Well, the draw over 60 minutes is +330, and I think 2 teams would both happily take the point and fight for a second one, are the Dallas Stars and Seattle Kraken. So going to be hitting that +330 tonight on the draw, and we might be trying to take a tie every week this year because you know what it is. It's 3-point season in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, tie every night this week, and it is tie season. We did have a couple of them yesterday. Anaheim coming up to Nashville there. What's the other one? Sorry, Minnesota and Arizona. Rangers, Penguins. There's definitely out there where teams need to make sure they get that point, and I think both teams know it benefits them both. So why even bother scoring in a tight game with like 5 minutes left? Just like play pretty conservative, get the point, and hopefully you win. So
I did get that feeling. I don't know about you, but I did get that feeling in the final few minutes of Saturday's game against the Panthers. I mean, that was a point where both of those teams absolutely had to have two, but one was better than nothing, and they weren't going to do anything to prevent that single point from happening. And then obviously we know what Mark Scheifele did in overtime towards the end of the 5-minute period.
I think it's been proven in studies that the number of shots decrease in a tie game. Like in these kind of scenarios, people who have looked into it that are smarter than me, and I think that would make sense, especially in these like non-conference games. Like, let's go, each take your point and go. But we know Dallas is like Mr. Overtime loss team this season, so I would pick them to tie pretty much any night, right? Like how many OT losses? 12? What is it?
13, I think. 13 or 14.
Yes, you were correct. 13 overtime losses.
Same with Calgary.
That's crazy. That's a lot. Coyotes have 11.
Listen, if the Calgary Flames were a little better in OT or a shootout, you're probably talking about a much closer playoff race right now. I mean, that's the other thing. If you're only getting 1 point when you go to OT, I mean, I'd imagine with 13, they'd have to be on the wrong end of the ledger, but who knows? Maybe 10 of their 30 wins are also in overtime as well. All the odds up at Coolbet. Of course, March Madness brackets are out as well. Check out all the futures over at Coolbet. Use the promo code WST on your first deposit. If you haven't played a Coolbet before, hook you up with a 100% bonus up to $200 on your first deposit over at Coolbet. All right. By the way, I'll throw this again for people that pop by here late, or it's actually pinned up at the top of the chat or in the description. Get your tickets. It's filling up for the Sports Trivia Night, Wednesday, March 29th, over at Little Brown Jug. Be a hell of a fun time to get together with the WST crew. First event we did was a big hit, and I imagine this will be similar. Not to mention, we get to drink all those great beers down at Little Brown Jug in the Exchange. So there you go. Check our socials. If you're listening on the podcast, go to the YouTube. Yeah. In the description of this show is the link, and it's going to be a lot of fun, Reem.
Yeah, I was going to say winnipegsportstalk.com/links for anyone on the podcast. It has all of our social media links. And of course, important, that ticket info at the top. So that'll have it there. And I will add, yes, follow all the social media links as well, the description down below. Trying to, on here, we're closing in on 9K subs. Got over 3K Instagram, closing in 2K Facebook. So help us out, and if you do see our content on there, make sure you're liking it. It tells the almighty algorithms that we're good and might show it to more people.
Scardy in chat, when is Huss scheduled to present his PowerPoint on the loser point to the NHL meetings in Florida? I'm not joking. I've offered that to a member of the Board of Governors. I've said it face-to-face to the commissioner of the National Hockey League and to Bill Daly. They're not having any of it. That's being said, everything looks a lot closer than it really is. Doesn't help the games, and the entertainment value in the last 5 minutes of these games is impacted. They know it. They just don't want to admit it.
Yeah, speaking of the GM's meetings, they are happening right now in Florida. I know Sean Reynolds is there. Here's what they're talking about real quick. Coaches challenge. They want expanded for same team high stick penalties. Like when high sticks your own team and they don't know because the game's too fast, and incorrect puck over glass calls. I'll just weigh in on that. This shouldn't be up to the coaches to fix the referees' mistakes. They should be able to, if it's that obvious, someone should be able to go down and buzz the ref and change it. I don't think it should be.
What if it's not that obvious? What if it's just a really close call? I mean, that happens all the time.
It shouldn't be. Then you can't tell anyways. So then it shouldn't be up. I don't think it should be up to the coaches. Like what? So they only have so many challenges, and what if there's more things that are challengeable? I don't know. Again, the refs should. You have video review if it's that obvious.
Put it this way: they don't need to be reviewing every damn thing. But if it's important enough to a coach, I think they should be able to challenge it. And I would suggest they just go along the lines of the NFL, where if you get your first challenge right, you get another one. And I mean, maybe there's a max during a game. What is it?
But what
NFL,
if they make more mistakes
two, right?
than the max? And there's another key moment, and they're like, "Oh no, you can't review. You don't have a challenge," when it's so obvious that it needs to be overturned.
Well, if it's so obvious, then you would have your challenge because you were right before. I mean, the bottom line is,
but if you weren't right, though,
coaches were using their challenges as timeouts.
I would agree.
It was. I mean, instead of having a 30-second timeout, it was basically a 2-minute video review challenge for the exact same reason. Listen, the offside is still
dumbest.
It is still the dumbest. But I'm for more. I mean, for the most part, they get it right and they get it quite quickly. So I would have no issue with that. And if you wanted to expand some of the things like high sticking your own guy in the face and the other team getting a 5-minute major, they should be doing that. But I mean, I don't know what the other option is. If it's not on the coaches, who's it on?
Didn't they have they can review it, right? What happened when they called the 5-minute major on the weekend? They're like, oh no, we can review this now. So,
well, that's what the referees do that themselves. That's why they call the 5-minute major.
Yeah,
you can't review it if it's a 2-minute, but you can review it in as a 5. And we're seeing that a lot more right now. And I don't think anyone's complaining about it.
Yeah, well, I just think if it's that obvious that a guy sticked a guy in the head, I don't know, what do you call icing? You can have the option to review. They gave themselves the option to review for 5 minutes. You can't give them an option to review for some other kind of penalty. I don't know. It's why don't they just automatically review every puck over glass? Why don't you automatically review every touchdown
wait
in the
a second.
NFL?
You just said you didn't want tons of reviews. Now we're reviewing every play?
Well, you're not going to have it stop the play, but maybe there's a guy in the booth who's takes a look at it for 2 seconds and sees, oh yeah. And then if it's obvious, they buzz down.
It's never 2 seconds. I don't know. Just make the call, and if you don't like it, challenge it. And like Chuck says, and I agree, I like the fact that there's a penalty for an offside for a wrong challenge. To me, those the puck over glass are usually pretty cut and dry. I mean, I don't know why that would be different than.
Oh no! Don't you know? Sometimes it nicks the glass at the top, or it goes off someone else's stick, and you can't really tell unless you slow it down frame by frame.
That's possible, sure, but I mean that's not 99% of them.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Use the challenge. Anyways, that'll be interesting to see what we get out of the NHL GM. It's
a couple more. We can talk about.
Should be talking about 3-point games.
Yeah, no, they're not talking about that. They're talking about fights that take place after clean hits, which we all think is stupid. They want to make a skate. Cut protective equipment on your wrists and legs mandatory. Guys keep getting cut, and they're they're talking about teams holding players out for trade-related reasons. Really dumb that Jacob Chychrun sat 2 months because they couldn't decide if they wanted to trade him or not. That was, I don't know, seems unfair to the player.
They knew that they were going to trade him, but what they didn't want him to do is get hurt. Well, what took so long? I mean, I guess they were brokering a number of offers from a number of different teams, and ironically waited until they got way less than everyone expected they were going to get. But
didn't work out.
They took their hey, listen, if they get a great player with that Ottawa pick this year, we'll have a different feeling on whether it worked out or not.
And then other comments, I guess Bill Daly's asked about all the trades happening in the week before the deadline. I don't really know what he can say about that, but I think it's smart by the GMs maybe not to wait to the the deadline, when you do a school project, you're handed in early.
I thought the deadline was way better this year than any year I can frankly remember because there was so much activity day after day after day. I know it's great for TSN to be able to pack everyone in for one day and have the trade deadline frenzy, and it's a big deal. But I mean, the NHL, at least for I think most hockey fans, was far more interesting for 2 weeks leading up as opposed to leaving everything done, and you get one trade, you mention it, and then you forget about it because you're right on to the next one because everything's happening on that last day.
Well, I'll say that the deadline day for us, it was still one of our most viewed shows on YouTube, so we had a lot of fun. So, I mean, I don't know what Bill Daly can do about this, but I guess he's asked to comment about it. This was in The Athletic. Final one, the sale of the Senators. They received some bids for it, so we'll see what happens. Hopefully Ryan Reynolds' team wins.
Yeah, I think they'll definitely want Ryan Reynolds' team to win the bid. Obviously, someone's selling it, so I'm sure it will eventually go to the highest bidder, and they also want it to be the highest possible price as well. Great stuff. Hey, got to give a big thanks to our friends at Nick and Nicky DQ for their support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. If you missed our anniversary show last week, Nick made an amazing WST cake for us. And if you are having a party or an event coming up soon that you think would be even better with the DQ ice cream or blizzard cake, hit them up on Instagram at DQ Manitoba. They'll custom make the cake for you with whatever logo you need, and you can pick it up quick and easy at any of the 4 Nick and Nicky DQs: DQ Niverville, DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, and DQ St. Anne's. And while you're there, jump on one of those flamethrower burgers, maybe some honey barbecue chicken fingers, and you can always grab maybe some dilly bars or Buster bars to take home for the family as well. Big thanks to Nick and Nicky DQ for their support of WST. All right, Remo, final act of today's show is to thank everybody for entering in our AEW contest. We closed it off right before the show when it was scheduled, and we spanned the wheel, and the winner of the tickets for AEW is Chris Vermette. Chris, thank you very much. We had tons of regulars in there, but Chris, often in the chat as well. Congratulations to you. We'll send you a message and get you those tickets, and hopefully see you on Wednesday night for AEW. Remo, I have to admit, from talking to a few friends, watching a little bit more of the AEW from last week, I am really fired up for this event on Wednesday. I think it's going to be an absolute riot.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a huge card, and we had Don Callis here Friday. Make sure you check that interview on our channel here, and we tweeted out the video of him saying Kenny Omega is the greatest ever, and just praising the Winnipeg-born talent. So I think we got some smart wrestling fans here, and they're going to be cheering on the Winnipeg guys, and I think it'll be a nice homecoming for all of them. So I'm looking forward to that event Wednesday.
You bet. Oh, and Chris is in chat. No way. Yes way, Chris. Thanks for entering. Thanks to everyone that entered as well. And I don't know. We'll see what our plans are. I know it is sort of an early start, so I'm not sure whether we're going to do a little hookup beforehand, but who knows, maybe even after. I know some of our regs are going to be there as well, but myself, Remis, going to have a nice crew there. And Chris, as I said, we'll be in touch and let you know how to get those tickets, and hopefully see you there. Well, listen, we went OT because I was going at it with Hammer, but it was a lot of fun. And frankly, we got into Hammer way late because we had such a great conversation with Dave Poulin. If you popped in late, go back and check that out. Lots of good vibes coming out of the weekend after those 2 big wins for the Winnipeg Jets. Huge game tomorrow in Carolina, and then back to host the Boston Bruins on Wednesday afternoon. Thanks so much to the sponsors that make this show happen every day. Big thanks to Jeff and Dave for being such great guests, and obviously a huge shout out to Michael Remis for making the show happen, and obviously the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day. Tomorrow, another game day edition. Mike McIntyre will join us from Carolina. We'll set this up, and expecting Andrew Harris on the show tomorrow as well, which should be a heck of a lot of fun. That's going to do it for us for an extended Monday show. We'll see you tomorrow live at 1 p.m. Tell a friend about Winnipeg Sports Talk. Let them know how they can subscribe on YouTube and on the pod. Hit that thumbs up on your way out, and we'll catch you tomorrow afternoon to see if the Jets can go 3-0 on this road trip after winning the first 2. Have a great one, everyone.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.